Bore da croeso, good morning and welcome to today's meeting. As is usual practice, we are holding the meeting virtually, so people will be able to watch the proceedings in real time. Also, a recording of the meeting will be posted on our website very shortly following the conclusion of the meeting if people wish to catch up on the proceedings and our discussions. We do have simultaneous translation facilities in place. If people listening wish to hear the translation, then if they hover over the globe icon at the bottom of the screen and select Hear Translation, they will hear the English translation feed if someone is speaking or presenting through the medium of Welsh. That we have a consent agenda, as is normally the case, and hopefully if people have issues on that, they've raised them with the relevant officer. If something has occurred to people since receiving the papers, then please mention it, and I'll ask Chris if we can find some space on the agenda to address any issues you have. There are a number of people joining us who don't normally attend the meeting, and I'll introduce them a little bit later, but they're Matthew Wintle and Rachel Powell, and also Michelle is joining us, as is usually the case for the strategic performance strategic procurement report item on the agenda. Before we move into the main agenda, I would like to ask the board to take a few moments of silence to remember a colleague, Richard Evans, from our corporate services team, who passed away in December. Richard was a hugely valued member of the DHCW team and will be greatly missed. On behalf of the board and DHCW, I'd like to extend our sincere condolences to Richard's family and friends at this time. And if I could ask if we could pause for a moment's silence. Thank you. Thank you all very much. If I now proceed to the main agenda and begin with apologies from absence, we have a number of apologies for absence. Apologies from Helen Thomas, the Chief Executive, who is at the first session of a development program that happened to coincide with this meeting, and she's been deputised by Claire Osmondson-Liddle, the Deputy Chief Executive, who will pick up on a number of issues that Claire would otherwise pick up on. And apologies from Rydian Hurl, the Executive Medical Director. And I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Matthew Wintle, who's the Associate Director for Secondary Care, who will be ably replacing Rydian on those things that Rydian would normally cover during a meeting. We look forward to hearing from you in fairly shortly, Matthew. And then also we've had apologies from Andrew Fletcher, the Associate Board Member, who's also sent his apologies. I don't think there are any other apologies. I think that covers them all. I know that Marilyn, you're not feeling on absolute top form, and from time to time you may just need to step away from the camera, but you'll still be with us through the meeting. So please do feel free to that if the staring at the screen becomes a bit too much for the whole morning. So we'll understand if you step away from the camera. Declarations of interest. I haven't received any declarations of interest. Has anything occurred to anyone since receiving the papers, reading through the papers? No, thank you all very much. If I move on then to the consent agenda, as I say, nothing has been mentioned to me in terms of people wanting to put something on the main agenda, so I'll go through them and stop me and buy one if you do want to raise any issues. So the first is approving the minutes from the board meeting held on the 30th of November 2023. There are a couple of minor amendments to that since publishing. Section 2.6 has been updated to say approving the gender pay gap report, and also the date of the meeting was incorrect by 1 day, and that's been updated. So people happy to approve those minutes? Thank you. Then we're approving the private abridged minutes from the board meeting held on the 30th of November 2023. Seems like a long time ago now, doesn't it, folks? People happy to do that? Yes, thank you. Then we are noting the actions on the action log and noting that there are no outstanding actions at present. I'm sure people are happy to do that. Noting the forward work plan, noting the end of year reporting arrangements. We are receiving the board champions annual report and approving, and I hope you do, the change in board champion role assignment outlined in section 4.1 of the report. People happy to approve that. Alistair, you're raising. Go on.
Thanks, Simon. And I didn't notice it until last night. It seemed to be a relatively small thing, but on the board slides we're now looking at, and I checked back, it's changed since our last board meeting. At the top of each page, we're translating digital health and care Wales into what seems to me a relatively new line. I'm not familiar with it. Delivering digital healthcare to the people of Wales. Now, that might seem like a small nuance, but it can be a very different thing, digital health and care to digital healthcare. And I just wondered where that came from and whether or not that's something that is now the way that we translate what we do, because it seems to clash with what's coming later in the agenda, the strategy for and our missions. So I just wanted to flag it up. I didn't notice it until I was going through it again last night.
Chris, can you pick up on that with comms? And
yeah, I think it's related to the new branding, but I'll pick it up, Alistair. Thanks for raising, and we'll come back just to confirm what's happened there. Well
spotted, Alistair. People, I think I got a nod of approval on changing the board champion role assignment. Yeah, thank you. And then we are receiving for assurance our follow-up response to the Senedd Health and Social Care Committee and Public Accounts and Public Administration Committee scrutiny report. And are people happy to approve the estates update? Thank you. If we move on then to the main agenda, and the first item, as usual, is the shared listening and learning presentation. And we are going to be hearing about an update on our research and innovation activity. And I'm going to hand over to Dr. Matthew Wintle for your moment in the sun, Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. It's my privilege to represent Rudian Hurl today and to introduce Rachel Powell, who heads up Information Intelligence and Research at Digital Healthcare Wales. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Rachel to deliver the presentation and foster discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. Morning, everyone. Bordar. So I'm Rachel Powell, Associate Director of Information Intelligence and Research at Digital Health and Care Wales. And I've been asked to give a bit of an overview presentation this morning on progress in respect of where research and innovation activities over the last 12 months or so since I was last at the board, but also to share some reflections and learning, which will hopefully help to inform where we're going in the next year as well. Next slide, please. So hopefully board members will be familiar that at the end of 2022, I came to the board with our first Digital Health and Care Wales research and innovation strategy. And that was a culmination of extensive engagement separated into 4 strategic aims, which are on the slide in front of you. And essentially the ask was for the board to approve that strategy and the approach going forward to organise efforts under those strategic aims and a commitment to how DHCW could drive forward research and innovation. So as a reminder then, the 4 strategic aims, the first one was around focusing on the assets and the resources that our Digital Health and Care Wales as a data and digital organisation could provide to the ecosystem within Wales and how we could further support R&I activities. Aim 2 was around focusing on quality and impact and how we could commit the limited resources that we have to the best effect to make the most impact and improve outcomes for patients. Aim 3 was around effective partnerships and what our role is as an effective partner, but equally how we can work collaboratively with partners across the ecosystem. And then strategic aim 4 was around developing a culture of innovation, focusing primarily on where own staff within DHCW, but also how we can support and lead the ecosystem where necessary and step into that space. So as a result of having the endorsement on that research and innovation strategy. We formally established the R&I function at the start of 2023, and as such, we appointed a head of R&I to help drive that forward, Dr. Rachel Jemmin. Rachel was tasked with setting out an implementation plan to really set out what the activities would be, organised under those 4 strategic aims, and we were really pleased to see the commitment within the IMTP under Mission 4, driving value and innovation, and a specific portfolio for research and innovation as well. So setting out a commitment and those activities that would be taken forward in 2023-24. At this point, I just wanted to pause because we've circulated the first research and innovation annual report. So I'm not proposing, you'll be pleased to hear, to exhaustively go through all of the activity within that annual report, but I heard loud and clear when I presented at the last board that, you know, there was a real interest and support from the board to start surfacing and to commit to communicating some of that activity and to take that forward. We've published our first R&I annual report, so I want to touch on some of those activities under those aims throughout this morning's presentation, which will help to inform the reflections and learning. Next slide, please. So perhaps one of the most ambitious areas of work that we've been taken forward within the research and innovation team has been around the find, recruit and follow-up service that's been proposed for Wales. We've been working quite closely with Healthcare Research Wales as part of putting that proposal together. And in a nutshell, what that's looking to do is to work out how, as a national organisation, bringing data from across the various health and care providers together, how we can support and bring clinical trials more into Wales to benefit the Welsh residents and to support a very research active environment. We're on target to deliver that proposal, and I'm actually bringing something through the internal mechanisms next week. So a lot of collaborative effort and pulling that together, looking at the assets and resources we have now, so how we can deliver something quickly to attract those clinical trials that will benefit Welsh residents, that will make new treatments available and accessible, addressing the issues of inclusivity and equality across Wales. And so it's not just if you happen to be a Welsh resident that lives close to a health board that's particularly research active, but this is about bringing at scale better advantages to make Wales an attractive place for clinical trials to happen, and regardless of where you live, you know, giving you access to those clinical trials and the new cutting edge treatments. And we think we've got a really important role with as DHCW as a leading data and digital partner to bring that those opportunities together on behalf of the ecosystem. And it's a really ambitious but important piece of work, and something that I think is really going to change the landscape in Wales actually for the better. Next slide, please. Strategic aim 2 then was focusing on quality and impact, and again quite a lot of detail within the research and innovation annual report for members to read further information on, but we spent a lot of time listening to stakeholder engagement when we were developing the strategy, and the feedback that we were getting was there was often work happening that we couldn't correlate to the core business plan. There was pockets of good things going on, but not really that robust governance and process built around it. So I make no apologies for the last 12 months in terms of putting that robust governance in place, and as such we've now got a research and innovation operational and engagement group that meets on a monthly basis. That's comprised of representation across the organisation, so it's not just a dedicated small team of individuals who are driving it, but also using that collective capacity and expertise across the organisation, including the likes of information governance, commercial partners, finance, operations, etc. So we've really got that rich expertise and resource that's informing the activities going forward, and reviewing it in terms of does this fit strategically with the business plans and the work that our teams are involved with. We've also got a research and innovation board that's chaired by Rydian Hill, our executive medical director, and Matthew Wintle is also a key member on that board. And that really brings some of the senior authority and endorsement coming up from the operational engagement groups. We've got that, and we know we're very limited resources to the right activities that's going to be the most impactful, and we've got that quality built around the activities that were taken forward as well. And that board meets on a bi-monthly basis and provides some of the strategic leadership and direction for the R&I activities that we're committing to. And that board also feeds into the Digital Governance and Safety Committee that's chaired by Rowan. So again, we're trying to fit into the existing governance and to make that as seamless as possible. We've also made some key appointments as a reference. So we've got a head of research and innovation, and we've also appointed a research and innovation support manager, and obviously Dr. Matthew Wintle, associate medical director for secondary care. And we're really building the skill set of that core team. So we've got the knowledge and expertise to help drive that forward. The other thing that I wanted to briefly mention was, as well as the governance, we've been focusing on process around this. So again, listening to the feedback from our stakeholders, they don't want a complex process. They want to move quickly. They want to know how to access the data. They want the front door. They want to route in, and they want us to deal with their issues and look for solutions in the best way possible. So we've been working behind the scenes to put robust cost recovery policies in. We've also recently published an IP policy, intellectual property policy for DHCW, and all these things are important in terms of having that robust suite of tools and resources available to facilitate the R&I activities that we take forward. Next slide, please. Effective partnership. So we hear this a lot throughout different spheres of work, but essentially we wanted to maximize the role that we have as a trusted and effective partner in that data and digital space, but also how we can work effectively and collectively draw on the strengths of our partners across industry, academia, and the health and care landscape. And it's been a period of reintroduction, if you like, so introducing ourselves as an R&I partner. Part of that's talking about the work of DHCW more generally, but part of it is having that reintroduction, if you like, of ourselves in that research and innovation space and setting out what our offer could be. And we've attracted a lot of work through that, and it has been a case of pitching up and ensure that we've got representation on the right networks and boards and forums, and I've listed some of the examples. There's further in the R&I annual report, but that's been really important to grow that partnership and that collaboration that I know is one of the key values of DHCW as well. Next slide, please. And then finally, for strategic aim 4, developing that culture of innovation across the organisation. It's been one of the things we noticed when we started this function off was perhaps the lack of knowledge across the organisation, or understanding even of how research and innovation may or may not impact the day-to-day fabric of what we do. And we've spent a lot of time working with teams across the organisation to grow that knowledge base, but also to help understand their work and how we can perhaps influence that for the better, and how we can embed some of our R&I activities as part of the day-to-day business of the organisation. So it's not seen as a nice to do add-on activity, but that it's, you know, essential, it's core to everything that we do. There's been a lot of efforts in terms of, you know, pitching up at staff conferences, team meetings. We've done a series of 10 talks, but also some of the engagement and education activities. And actually, when I mentioned at the start of the presentation, we've recognised where the system is asking us to step into that leadership role. And I think in the research and innovation space in particular, that's what the system's asking of us. So we're doing a lot of working on behalf of the Innovation Leads Network across Wales to step in that leadership space and say, right, we'll take a leadership position on this, and we'll develop a suite of education and resources to help embed that culture and knowledge across the ecosystem and within your own organisations as well. And it's some really good work happening in that regard. Next slide, please. So hopefully that's given a bit of a flavour of some of the work that's happening across those 4 strategic aims. And as I say, plenty more detail within the Research and Innovation Annual Report. Not enough time to go through that in a lot of detail, unfortunately. But if I can just reflect then and share some learning from the last 12 to 18 months, and I've spoken to the team as well, so these just on my reflections. But we're very fortunate in Wales. We speak about this a lot, you know, the networks that we have are really strong. We know we're counterparts. We across academia as well, we've got really strong links into those organisations, but we do sometimes overcomplicate the ecosystem. And I think where partners in particular are looking for easy routes in, we need to signpost better. We need to be really clear on what we're USP is as an organisation, what we're partners' strengths are. And we need to understand how to direct and work with those partners in the right way when appropriate. And there's a lot of activity happening in that regard, but we must continue to strive to do that better. We're hearing that all the time. We need to be dynamic and responsive, so that's really important, and it links back to the conversation around we sit on the right networks, we're hearing the problems, we're quite dynamic in terms of developing our plans and responding accordingly, and the team are working really hard to pull things around quickly and to you know, get that into the plan where appropriate. But it's really important that we're hearing and that we're close to those conversations and the right networks to be responsive and be in a position where we can pick up and react to that work. I mentioned about some of the work we're doing in respect of pricing and cost recovery of activities, and that's essentially so we can reinvest in the service and ensure that we're building a sustainable R&I function, and it's not just an add-on to people's already very busy occupied diaries, but rather we're building capacity and capability into our organisation to do it properly. So doing a lot in that regard, but equally, and we are working quite closely with Michelle Sell's team and commercial, trying to understand how we can provision ourselves with the right suite of tools and resources from a commercial perspective as well. And similarly with information governance, we need to have the right tools and resources and input at the right stages to take that work forward in the right way and quickly when appropriate. Front door, I've mentioned previously, I can't, you know, emphasize this enough. That's what the partners are asking for. It's fantastic that we're working really closely with NDR colleagues and that we're working closely with Swansea University's secure anonymised information linkage colleagues, and we input and we're a partner in that space. But in some respect, colleagues and partners don't care. They just want to know, how do I get the data? What's the easiest route? I don't care the hoops I've got to go through. I'd make it simple for me. We want one front door, and we want you guys to organise yourselves a bit better. So we've got to be responsive to that. And as I've mentioned previously, we need to work and draw on the expertise from colleagues across the organisations and teams. We've also got to be really aware of and be realistic about our limitations and set realistic expectations in terms of what we can commit and what we can deliver. And I think being able to say no, and that actually it's not a strategic fit with the work that we're taking forward, or we're not in a position, we don't have the resources, or we require that investment before we can take that forward. These are all important conversations that we're having with partners to set out a robust, impactful quality plan, but something that we can deliver as well, and that's really important. And then the final reflection, and it alludes back to strategic aim 2 in terms of focus and quality. This takes time. Again, I make no apologies for the groundwork and the foundations that we've been setting out over the last 12 months, the governance, those suite of tools for us to take forward these activities. All of that takes time and effort. And like I said, we spent a lot of time building our brand and engaging and communicating on that. And whilst it's exciting to jump to the next step, so what projects are we involved with? And there are plenty. I think I think 2023 for me has been a year of building those foundations. 2024 feels like a space where we're moving from really strong footings now, and it's an exciting space to be in. Next slide, please. And this is the final slide. So just in terms of next steps, then, as I say, 2024, exciting space. We've got those foundations in place. The organisation has grown around us, and we've got access to some fantastic expertise through colleagues and engagement and comms, and we're working together to put robust and comms and engagement plans in place for how we can build further and you know, collectively take forward our plans for 2024. And we want to increase that R&I activity, and there's quite a lot mentioned within the report, but there's a lot on the horizon as well. So we want to increase that activity in those collaborations and start to be able to recover some of the resources and invest further in the service and build a sustainable, robust service going forward. I mentioned the Find, Recruit and Follow-up business case, so expect me to come back and give further updates on that, but that's an important one to watch, and we're engaging with Healthcare Research Wales about the level of investment that's going to require to deliver a robust service that's really going to benefit the population of Wales. And we need to continually monitor our processes and, as I say, be responsive to what our partners' needs are and adapt our ways of working accordingly. There's lots going on around us. There's the NHS Wales app, there's a National Data Resource Programme, and we're working with those partners as well in those programmes to work out how we can continually enrich the R&I landscape and environment, and that's exciting as well. Mentioned previously about training and investment that we're having in developing the culture. And we've got a suite of resources and tools that we're about to launch in respect of that, and there'll be further work on that going into 2024. And we're going to be commissioning some key partners to help where we do have limited resources and limited capacity. We've got some really effective partnerships with various academic bodies who are chomping at the bit to work with us, and that's a really important signal, I think. So I'm going to pause for breath there, and last slide, please. And I'm happy to take any questions at this stage. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, Rachel. A huge amount of work gone on, obviously, and you've told us about some of it, and there's a huge amount more in the report that you've referred to, and I'm really pleased I now know what SAIL stands for, so thank you, Rachel. I've lived this long without knowing what SAIL in Swansea stood for. I've got a number of people with their hands up, Rowan and then Marion.
Thank you, Simon, and great update, Rachel. So great to hear from you. I had the opportunity, because I have the honour of being the board champion for R&I, to attend the champion network meeting just this week, and so I thought it was important to share that, from Health and Care Wales Research Matters document, they highlight the importance of making better use and faster progress on using digital in research and developing the use of data for research. And all of those themes that you spoke about, such as a central front door, very much kind of wanted by the wider healthcare research network in Wales. So really good to hear that. I also think that whilst we all understand that the value and potential R&I applications that healthcare data can be put to, I'd just like you to perhaps reflect on, as you are assessing our research proposals that come across your desk, thinking about information governance and how you are thinking about impact, so that people can be assured that their data is being used in a responsible way and in their best interests. Can you perhaps talk a little bit more about that?
Go on, Rachel, take that one now, and then we'll come back to Marion.
Brilliant. Oh, sorry, I was just pausing to see if Matthew wanted to come in. I'm happy to take.
Yeah, you do it as you wish.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Rowan. Really great question. I've been quite impressed by Wales being pioneers in privacy, actually. UK HDR use methodology from SAIL of pseudo-anonymization, and that's already allowing and fostering significant research across multiple data sets across the UK. And I'm not sure we've said enough about that, actually, in terms of how we pioneered and supported SAIL to build that methodology.
And Matt, can you just explain what pseudonymization is for the public that might be listening to the board meeting?
It's essentially taking the data, the health data, but stripping out identification methods that you can actually tie it back to an individual person. If you like, it becomes a digital twin of you without any identifiers being able to link it back to you. So then you see a population of anonymous people, and then you can look at subsets within those populations and look for common strains of diseases and start to stratify the population and look at different risk patterns and longitudinal data over time. So all of these things are really essential if we want to move to a health service that's more preventative and leverage some of these exciting technologies that are coming our way.
Okay, thank you. We'll take Marion and David and then come back to you, Matt and Rachel.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Rachel, for such an interesting presentation, and good to see what's taken place over the past year. Everything that we do as a board, of course, depends on working with others. And this is especially true and clear, I think, in this strategy, and also in the wider strategy, which will come before us a little bit later on this morning. You refer to the relationship with the higher education sector and the importance of that sector. Could you tell us a little bit more about how mature that relationship exists between this strategy specifically and the universities across Wales, and where we are hoping to take this in future?
Hold on to that question, both. David.
Simon, thanks, Rachel. Rachel, you've laid out a lot of good work that's been done, which is the foundation of building something really great here. I think personally there's huge opportunity to deliver value into the NHS through the work you're doing. But you've also rightly said we need to be sustainable. So how are you planning to grow what we're doing and make it sustainable going forward?
Okay, folks, so academic links and sustainability. Who wants to pick up on those points first?
I don't
Go on,
go
on, Rachel.
So thank you, Marion. So a really good point in terms of the academic relationships that we have. And to answer your question, we have some very well-established relationships with academic partners, particularly within Wales. They could be better and there could be more far-reaching. So we've got really strong links with Swansea University through the work of SAIL, as we mentioned, the SAIL data bank. Equally with Cardiff University and the Data Science Academy in particular, my team's got some strong links there. We've got a regular pipeline of staff that we recruit and who we have working and doing various projects in my department to give them a taste of the organisation, if you like. And then, yeah, we've got that steady pipeline of staff coming in from that. So I think there's some established relationships already, and then equally the witty tripartite arrangement that we're part of with University of South Wales and Trinity St David. So there's some good work happening in each of those organisations, but there's always new areas and schools within those academic institutes and the likes of North Wales. We want to do more there, and we've got some conversations coming up over the next few months actually about how we can strengthen the arrangements and encourage more graduates to come and work with us, but equally where there's some expertise within those schools and some fantastic work that they're doing. Also aware that the schools themselves and the universities, Cardiff in particular, get significant investment in particular areas. So we want to tap into that and to benefit where we can. So we're always looking at how we can, it might seem like it's a good plan, and it is, but how we can improve it. We're always looking to build on that further. And then I think, and I know Rowan's spoken to me about this previously, but it's really important we establish those partnerships in Wales, but we also need to look beyond Wales about where we can bring in additional expertise, and that's something that we're working towards as well. And recently doing some work with Oxford University. So some fantastic efforts, but we will only grow and get better in that space. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sure Marion will be particularly keen on developing links with Bangor, particularly as the medical school comes on stream and starts to move. Yeah. And then the second bit, the sustainability, David's point about sustainability. And then Matt, if you want to come in and add anything, please feel free. Who wants to pick that up? Rachel?
Sorry,
Matt?
I'll just quickly say, so really good point again, David, and I think I touched on this in the presentation. In the past, we've been guilty of supporting work, but not doing it in a way where we're cost recovering the commitment of the resources that we put forward to support that work. And as such, if we've been too busy or committed elsewhere, funded to do something else, that work drops off. Going forward, we're a formidable partner in that space. So we're working up costs and proposals with our partners to recognise the significant contribution that DHCW makes, so that we can start to reinvest some of that investment back into the service itself. And I've been working closely with Claire's team, a Director of Finance, to look at how we can embed the R&D financial policy within DHCW, because it is a slightly different way of working, and we've got links with some of the healthcare providers as well across Wales to share learning in that regard. But equally then, the proposal that we've got for find, recruit and follow up, that's when I say it's ambitious, I mean it sets out to change lives, to change the landscape of Wales. And I don't think it's a cheeky ask in terms of the resource plan that we've set out, but we've been really clear in terms of this is a if we're going to do this properly, we do it properly, and we as such we require investment into the organisation to set out a robust service that can meet the challenges ahead. So we're being very clear on how we set out with stall and how we attract further work into the organisation as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you, Chair, for offering me some time. Yeah, I think what we're moving towards is data as infrastructure, and data as infrastructure for the healthcare service, that we can plan services better, that we can move to a more prevention-based healthcare service. But also we've seen in recent years this convergence of care and research, and during the pandemic, it was never more obvious than how important it is to have research embedded within healthcare systems and the potential benefits that can be realized by doing it that way. So Digital Healthcare Wales, I feel, is tasked with a very important task of creating this data infrastructure and working with multiple partners to actually be able to leverage that infrastructure, but in the appropriate ways. And I think the work that Rachel's team has done this year in setting the governance structure, particularly with information governance and privacy as a right at the core of that, I think has been very impressive, and it's been done in the right way, and I think that's very important.
Thanks, Matt. And now Alistair and then Marilyn.
Thanks, Simon. Very interesting presentation, Rachel. Thank you, and Matt. On your strategic aim 2, I can absolutely see how important evaluating the impact of our research and innovation is, because apart from the limitation of our resources, it would or would not justify pretty well everything that we do. I just wonder, Rachel, and Matt, what your sense is if we have a robust enough system of assessing, whether it's through a system of feedback from our key partners or users, or is it done on a more ad hoc basis? Because it does feel to me that is such an important area.
Let's take Marilyn, and then I'll come back to you, Rachel and Matt, to sort of I'll respond and then wrap up. Marilyn.
It's going back, and thank you, Chair. It's going back. Thank you for a great presentation, by the way, Rachel. It's going back to what Rowan said a bit about the data, about how do we assure people that their data is going to be kept safe. I do lots within the community, and one of the things that troubles me in recent times is that people haven't actually sought medical help because of the lack of confidence they have, for instance, within the NHS. And I think that's something. We're doing all this work, but we're not front facing with the potential resident or patient, and it's about how are we going to assure ourselves that we tell people that that we're doing something for the good. And if we don't have the research, if they're not involved in the research, then we're not going to be able to necessarily come together with the best solutions for them in regards to treatment. So we talk about collaboration, but for me, it's wider than our strategic partners that we've already identified. For me, it's bigger than that because it goes into the community in which we serve, the residents, the citizens. So for me, it's just a bit about how do we make sure we get our voice to the public directly and not just through the health service, because it's a very different message that they're going to have, and that message in some respects is one that's not very it's not solid, it's fragmented. And so for me, I'm really pleased about our R&I strategy, but you know, I'm reflecting on how I see we're getting our voice out wider than through our NHS partners. Sorry. So
Yeah, if I can add to that as well, Rachel and Matt, is that, I mean, when we're talking to people about why it's important to gather data and all the issues of the safety and the protection and the anonymization, I think it's too often, I'm not suggesting we do this, but too often it's done in sort of abstract. And we have to explain to people in ways in which they understand, in terms of the impact on their family and their friends, and rather than it being for the greater good of a population. People just, I don't think, I can't get my head around that. I mean, it's difficult, but if you explain that it's actually in the best interests of, you know, if it's genetic stuff, it's the best interests of your children. Then I think people will begin to much more easily understand why the gathering of data is important, and the anonymization that comes with it brings the safety. I suspect, Rowan, you want to come in on this point as well, and then I will come back to you, Rachel and Matt, and we can wrap up.
Thank you, Simon, and for the opportunity just to respond. And I think people who know my background will be aware that I'm involved in a commercial organisation. We do a lot of research using patient data, and not I should say with any data sources that I'm aware of that come from Digital Health and Care Wales, just to be clear about any potential conflict of interest. But you know, as part of you know, a research active organisation, and it's perfectly reasonable that we would expect this of all of our potential R&I partners, is that part of the process of being ethically approved to access healthcare data around the world is to have a specific piece of work as part of the application that is about, you know, what are the benefits to the patient population or general public that you know, that is the reason for having access to the data. And perhaps that's something that we might discuss at a future board development day. You know, what would be the appropriate way of gathering together those public and patient engagement pieces, and thinking about how we can communicate them. Because Marilyn, it is absolutely critical for everyone's benefit that the general population understands why people who are involved in research programs generally have better healthcare outcomes. And so, you know, it's really important that those cover all the full range of the patient population. I happen to work in genetic populations. One of the biggest inequities is how much of those population data sets are primarily Caucasian, and it sets up an inequity. So I just wanted to add that lens, in part just so that the public realizes that voice is around the table, and to absolutely amplify what Marilyn has just said, and how critical that external communication is to be consistent with our approach of being a trusted and strategic partner. Thank you, Simon, for letting me say that.
Okay. Rachel, Matt, anything you want to, well, to pick up on those points, and then obviously anything in conclusion?
So if I think Rowan's probably answered it better than I would have, to be honest. And I think language is really important, and it's something that myself and Matthew have had extensive conversations about in terms of the terminology we use. But and Marilyn's spot on. You know, there's something around building where reputation as a trusted partner, and assuring the general public and individuals that we're not going to use their data, we're not going to sell their data, we're not going to use their data inappropriately. And there's a very, very, very robust legislation and governance around research. So there's lots of controls and stuff, but that conversation is very important. But yeah, equally, and this is where I think Matthew might want to come in, so I don't want to steal your thunder, Matthew, but it's also about you know, improving, again, picking on Rowan's point, it's about improving that access. And you are currently disadvantaged if you live in Wales, because we don't have these mechanisms in place now to sufficiently share or provide access to clinical trials, as an example. So as a Welsh resident, you are disadvantaged and your health outcomes will be poorer. That's a really stark message. And I think we need to balance that about building the trust and confidence of Welsh residents, but also this isn't about this is a choice that we're offering them in order to actively participate. And to your point, Simon, putting the individual message out there, you know, heavens forbid, if anything, you know, awful happened, you would want to ensure that your family and the nearest and dearest to you had access to the best treatments available. You don't want to be in a position where you're disadvantaged because of geographically where you live in Wales. It's a no-brainer. So we've got to balance that conversation out. But I know it's a tricky one to have. Matthew, sorry, I know you probably wanted to touch on that.
Go on then, Matthew, pick it up, and then we'll conclude then.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's about being able to offer cutting-edge technologies as they become proven to people in sometimes the more remote parts of Wales. So if you had a rare tumour and you lived in a remote part of Wales, how do you access cutting-edge technologies? And I think if you're profiled well enough in terms of your health data, you could potentially access some cutting-edge trials that are even out of the US. And I think data as infrastructure, as our sort of way of doing things, if people realize that by knowing more about your health, knowing more about your disease, your condition, you can then be eligible for world-leading cutting-edge technologies that might actually improve your outcomes. I think people are more likely to say, yes, you may look at my data to do that. I think when we phrase things such as, do you want to be involved in research? It's almost like, do you want to be a guinea pig? And I don't think that's what we're saying. I think we're saying, can we take the information that we know about your biology and your background and your risk factors, and can we use that to try and improve things in your health? And I think when it gets phrased to me that way, for me and my family, I know that I say, of course you can. That makes total sense. And likewise, I think there are certain communities that can be significantly impacted in a positive way by new technologies that are coming through. So I think what we're trying to do is build the right infrastructure in the right way to make sure that we can deliver those benefits.
Thank you, Matthew. Alistair, have to be brief.
Yeah, I haven't heard a reply to my question, Simon, which was, you know, that evaluation of the impact of what we do is really important. Have we got a strong enough system for getting that? Thanks.
Go on, Rachel.
Sorry, Alistair, I was going to put my hand up to say I haven't responded to Alistair yet. I think we're building it in all honesty. So I think it's something that we recognise, and it's helpful that I've also recently published where information analytics strategy, where we're very there's a lot of synergy between the research and innovation and the information analytics, and how we can utilize and look at evaluation and being responsive to user needs. So I think it's something that we absolutely recognize, and I think it's something that we need to do better, but we definitely recognize, and we're taking steps to do that now.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you very much. Good to see you again, and lovely to hear about the huge amount of work that's going on. And thank you, Matthew, for your contribution to this item as well. I think the level of conversation, discussion after your presentation indicates the amount of interest that the board have in this area of work. And how absolutely essential it is for the future of healthcare in all sorts of different ways, not just individual citizens, but the way in which healthcare is structured and delivered. So thank you very much, Rachel and Matthew. So if I move on then to the next item, which is my report with Ruth's Vice Chair report, there's just a few things I'd draw your attention to. The first is the first item, which is the programme governance arrangements update. They are moving on well, and I think we are now on track, as was the steer given to us by the Minister, to have completed all of the various changes across all the programmes by the end of March, for new arrangements to come fully into play from the 1st of April. I think, and thank all the team who've been involved in that to put us in that position. One minor change in terms of myself: I'm now stepping down as chair of the programme delivery committee and handing the reins over to David Selway, which is thought to be more appropriate in terms of governance terms, and something that we were given advice on from the Audit Wales. David has very kindly said that he is more than happy for me to be there as an observer through the meeting, so I'll be there. I promise not lurking. I'll just be there, David, because it is a really useful way for me to get an understanding of the issues across the organisation. So thank you very much, David, for taking on that role into the future. The next one, just wanted to draw your attention to, was the board development session we had in December. The report there, that was the final session we had with Deloitte as part of a 15-month programme, and now as a board we'll obviously be taking stock of where we are in terms of our own individual and collective development, and looking at what support might or might not be necessarily into the future to ensure that we continue to develop and grow as a board in terms of our approach to the roles we have. And then just finally, I think it's important to highlight the meeting with the chairs and vice chairs, and Ruth may want to add something to my brief comments with HLICE, the Citizens Voice body, which is a very useful meeting in getting to know the HLICE team, the chair and chief executive, and their approach to the future, and working with citizens in terms of their concerns and desires for the future of the health service, which is going to be very important as we move through into next year, given the resource environment that within which we are working. As sure as night follows day, there will be change, and that will be change involving HLICE's relationship with citizens and what they're able to feed into those processes. So that was a very useful meeting. Ruth, when I hand over to you, if you want to add anything, please do. Those are just the issues I wanted to pick up on. Ruth, is there anything you wanted to highlight in your report, your bit of the report? Ruth is gone. So there we are. Timing is everything. Okay, so we'll she did say she needed to drop off for something at some point during the meeting, so we'll move on from that. Are there anyone got any points or questions they want to raise on either my report or less easy Ruth's report? No, happy to receive that. Thank you very much. If I then hand over to Claire, who is acting for Helen at today's meeting. Claire, is there anything particular you wanted to draw our attention to in the Chief Executive's report?
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of Helen, I've got 4 key points briefly I'd like to report. The first one is 4.1, which is the staff briefing. So on December the 12th, we held a hybrid staff briefing, and it was great to have members of the exec team and also joined by staff both online and in person across our offices around Wales. In that briefing, we had a look back at 2023. We highlighted changes in the organisational structure, but also the work of the board. We did a winter wellbeing, and we finished off with a good festive quiz. Thank you to all of those who joined in and engaged of the day, and we had a really good staff turnout. The second one was DHCW's engagement with the 4 nations. So 4.2 highlights that where we shared from colleagues across the UK 4 nations, came together on the 15th of December for a virtual meeting. We had productive discussions around a range of topics, including digital maturity, workforce and data governance. And we're planning another meeting now, early March, to further those discussions. The health boards and special health authority engagement sessions are working well. And in January, we met with the Powys Teaching Health Board and again discussed various topics, including maturity and usability. And we look forward to continuing that work closely with our partners across Wales in 2024. And then finally, 4.7, the digital inclusion accreditation. It was with great pride to share that DHCW have achieved the Digital Inclusion Charter accreditation. This is a significant milestone in our ongoing commitment to ensure everyone in Wales can access data systems and to empower them to live healthier lives. I'm proud that our work in supporting the drive for digital inclusion nation has been recognised by the communities of Wales, and we will continue to seek ways to innovate and improve while continuing the consistent delivery of our core digital data and technology services. We'll work closely with the communities we serve to ensure digital equality is a reality for all. So that really concludes the highlights. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. And I'm really pleased that the last thing that you discussed, as people know, it's really close to my heart. And I think, you know, at every opportunity we need to bear down on ensuring that as we introduce more and more digitally enabled access to services, that doesn't in any way become excluding of people, so that we end up with the those who already do well just do better. So I'm really pleased that we're moving on that agenda. It's so important. Anyone got any? And so thanks. I mean, please convey my thanks, and I'm sure the board's thanks to everyone who's been involved in, because I know it's a whole team of people who are actively engaged in driving our digital inclusion agenda. So please convey our appreciation and thanks. Have anyone got any other points to raise? Okay, if I can thank you, Claire, on behalf of Helen, and then move on to the next item on the agenda in part 5, strategic items. And the first item is looking at our draft long-term strategy. And I'm going to hand over to Ivan to introduce the item.
Yes, thank you, Simon. The next two items are closely linked. So the first item is our long-term strategy for 6 years to 2030, and the following item is the IMTP, the integrated plan for a period of 3 years. So the first part of those 6 years. So I'll speak in more detail about the strategy, and then there's an update in the second paper. And I just wanted to mention that just in case you wanted some time for questions at the end of this. Before I begin, I'd just like to say I'm very proud of the opportunity to present this strategy. And I'd also like to begin by thanking everyone who's contributed to the work over the past 9 months, probably. And that's especially to members of staff across the organization. We've had a number of sessions with them. We've also had sessions with the exec team, with the leaders of all of the portfolios in relation to the IMTP, with board members. I think we met last week and also in the autumn. And we've also worked outside of DHCW, the exec teams of all other organizations. Perhaps at the time, they weren't really realizing that we were engaging with them about the strategy, but they thought we were talking about the IMTP. And we've also worked with other lead groups across NHS Wales, especially the digital directors, who've discussed this draft on a number of occasions, and also the planning directors, and we will continue with that work. I'd just like to mention a little bit more detail about the engagements. We haven't completed that work. This is a draft strategy that comes before you this morning. So there's still work and an opportunity for us to adapt and refine the document before we hopefully approve the final document in our meeting in March. I'd just like to mention some of the things that we've learned over the past year or so, but I'll begin by saying that the IMTP that we have is a strategic plan. And when we developed the IMTP last year, we intentionally wanted to bring new strategic elements into it over the coming 3 years, especially when we talk of our open architecture, etc., by creating new portfolios, changing the way that we present and introduce the IMTP. And that's been something that we've had a number of conversations with other organizations and stakeholders. We've had positive feedback on that, not just from our own staff, but also with people who are applying for jobs with us. They will look at the IMTP and they do get a good understanding, they tell us, around what we do as an organization. So it's been part of the engagement. We've also published a number of our own strategic plans, and the board has approved 4 strategies in the previous meeting on a number of different, for example, in initial or primary care, in RNI, and also our engagement with stakeholders. And all of those have fed into that, and it's fed into the main strategy. And if you remember, the Welsh Government published a digital strategy for health and care in the autumn. And we've had a number of conversations with government to ensure that we work with them on that. And that's interesting. I think it shows that we've had all of those conversations, but I'd like to highlight 2 things that we've learned during that time, or that's caused us then to change somewhat and to change some of the things that we'd imagined would have been in the strategy. One of those is the work that's been done on the digital maturity. So we've worked very closely with government and with NHS organisations on digital maturity. And that conversation has been a very productive one, and it has led to a change in attitudes and understanding around what we all need as a community of organisations over the coming 5-6 years. It's been most useful to us as we fed that into our strategy. And then secondly, the financial position and the significant financial pressures that are upon us currently and which will increase over the coming years. There is no choice. We know that our resources will be limited, and so the strategy has to show how we will be able to cope with that and how we will be able to undertake what we want to achieve. But without additional and significant money coming, we'll have to think very carefully how we can be as productive and efficient and be as focused as possible and to prioritize correctly. So all of that has fed into our work on the strategy, and that's caused us to change direction somewhat, I think, and board members will remember this from earlier discussions prior to Christmas, but this is the first opportunity for us to mention this publicly, so I'll mention that briefly. Originally, back in the summer of last year, we were working towards a policy strategy. And what is that? Well, it's a strategy that summarizes all of the other strategies around us. So the analysis, our own strategy, we are stakeholders, the government, we are trying to encompass all of that into one narrative that summarizes everything. And then we would create a descriptive picture up to 2030. That's the style in Wales and Healthcare Wales and also the government strategies. And that's what we intended to do originally back in the summer. But we've changed direction. And in front of you today, you have a delivery strategy more than a policy strategy. And the difference being is that we're setting very clear, measurable priorities which will influence our decisions over the coming years. And those aims are very obviously marked out in the strategy so that we can be more definite and more practical rather than describing things in a more general way. We are trying to describe things in detail in terms that what we will be driving towards over the coming 6 years so we can keep that focus. And as I mentioned at the outset, the relationship between the strategy and the IMTP is key and a useful one, I believe. So the strategy will set a long-term direction, but the IMTP is the one which shows what we will be doing over the coming 3 years. And in the IMTP, we will be able to show people that we are delivering against our strategic and legal duties, the government policies, etc. So if you're working with the commissioners or whether we are working with the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, we show that in the IMTP. And to prove that, it's important that we're able to do that in the IMTP, because annually it's reviewed, it comes to the board for approval, and then it will go to the government for approval. So there's far more assurance around the IMTP, and that's how we can then adapt from year to year to make sure that we combine all of those elements that we already have and any new ones which will come over the coming years. So I think it's powerful. So there's an opportunity in the next meeting to mention that, I think. So I've mentioned what's in the document. And so just to summarize what's in the document in a moment, but just to tell you about the next steps. So we will agree to a draft today. It's in the papers. They have been published, and I would welcome comments from anyone who is watching currently or is reading the papers or who just want to listen as they are driving or running around the park or wherever. You are welcome to give comments, whether that be in English or in Welsh, on the strategy in general, or any detailed comments as well. We will also have a program of engagement via meetings and online survey, and specifically to our stakeholders to ensure that you've all seen the document and that they've had an opportunity to respond to that document, but also with our staff internally. And the work with staff especially will try and align with that work on the IMTP and the strategy. It's important. When you see the two documents together in about 2 months' time, there's such a clear link. The IMTP is the one which takes us at least halfway through towards achieving or delivering those nodes. We will be refining the document. There will be changes to the document, but we don't want to make any fundamental changes, but it will put the polish on it to ensure that the language is consistent and that we can be as clear as possible in terms of what we're describing. So what's in the document? And just succinctly then, I'm sure you can read it for yourself. But the things that I'd like to emphasize is that we have made a decision to go very strongly with the 5 missions that we have. And those 5 missions are familiar to you, I'm sure. And I'm sure that everyone on this call would be able to say them from memory, which is to provide a platform which enables digital transformation, to provide digital services of high quality, to broaden the digital record, and also to increase the digital services that are available, creating value through innovation, and to be a dependable partner and an inclusive organization. Those 5 missions are in the framework, they're in the IMTP, they're in the annual plan. We use them in our work, we use them to report on our milestones throughout the year, but also we are continuing to look at those in the strategy. We're not creating a different strategy. We're using the framework that we have. And I think that strengthens the framework. Within the document, we have the strategic aims. There are currently 18 of them. There's space for more. And also we can refine the aims. They're organized according to the missions. So we have these clear channels in terms of where we are going. And they are measurable and ambitious. And they're quite definite and succinct, I believe. For example, by 2030, we will have 1 million users of the national app. All of our data will be on the NDR platform in the cloud, and our relationship with our users and stakeholders will be in the highest quarter. We will try and measure it to show that we're in the top quartile in terms of the quality and the nature of those relationships. So I do believe that we are challenging very challenging targets, which will stretch us as an organization. And then lastly, it's great to put those aims out, but as I mentioned, the financial position that we are in is extremely challenging. There's pressure on us as an organization, as all other NHS organizations. There are difficult choices ahead of us in terms of prioritization and changing the way we work. We all know that we have to transform as an organization and as a health system in general. So there are 5 principles which we'll be using in order to test ourselves, in order to steer the choices we make. So from year to year, it's important that we ask those questions as we create the IMTP. And again, you've seen them in English over the past 18 months or so. Putting people first, simplifying everything that we do, planning for further data and doing more digitally, finding and also stepping into the future. And there's more detail in that strategy around those. So to summarize, I'm very glad to be able to present this to you today, and I'm grateful for your contributions, everyone on screen, and also to staff and stakeholders for getting where we are today. We're almost at the end of the journey. We've got a couple of months to go, and I'm proud of the fact that it's simple and clear and it's memorable. Similar to the IMTP, a lot of hard work goes into creating such documents that are simple and easy to remember without slides and scripts and diagrams. So I think the structure is there, the 5 missions, the 5 principles, the 5 institutional values, which make it easier for our staff, especially to remember this and to use it consistently. And I'd just like to close by talking about the relationship and how all of this comes together. We have a 6-year strategy with strategic aims, which are relatively ambitious. And then we have an IMTP for 3 years. And in that, there are important delivery routes taking us towards the strategic aims. And then after agreeing to the IMTP, there's an annual business plan. And in that business plan, there are milestones that we place in the annual plan, which drives us down the route of the IMTP. And then you as a board don't see this, but to us within the organization, beneath those milestones, we have 12 and then sprints of a fortnight as we move towards the agile project approach. So you can see the hierarchy there that permits us to show how the 6-year strategy then links to the work that we do over a cycle of some 12 weeks as an organization. So I can't overstate just how much hard work has gone into this for so many people to try and summarize this into something which I think is simple and clear and memorable. So hopefully you like it and that you were happy to approve it, but I welcome questions and thank you.
Diolch, Ivan. Thank you, Ivan. No, I know the board have had a couple of opportunities to look at this, Ivan. So if there isn't a huge number, don't be offended by that. But I've got David and then Chris. David.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Ivan, for the update on the strategy. It's improved since we last saw it, so many thanks for all the hard work that's gone into that. There are 3 points I wanted to raise, having gone through it again. So the first, on the executive summary, we call out the health record and the care record. I'm just wondering whether we should also add in mental health care record. Otherwise, it might appear that it's got lost somewhere. Also, on the exec summary, we've got as one of our smart objectives the need to demonstrate net benefits and value from our data innovation service, which I would fully support. What I don't get from that statement, though, is a sense of where we will be in 6 years' time. So we could probably achieve that within a short space of time from where we are. So if there's any way of sort of indicating what that part of the organization would look like in 6 years, hopefully it will have grown significantly. But I think we should try and give some vision as to where we see that organization going and the sort of volume of work that we're doing in that area. So if you could give some more thought to that before we approve it in March, that would be really great. And then the other point I had was there's buried in the detail the context for this strategy. There's a mention of the fact that data from remote monitoring and wearables will form part of the health record. It's likely I would have thought that that will grow significantly over the period of the strategy. So I just wondered if we've given any thought to what we might do with that data in terms of analysis or supporting the wider NHS. So those are my three points.
Do you want to pick up on those, Ivan?
So I've got lots of hands up. So
Yeah, I know.
Shall I take them two at a time?
Yeah, okay. Well, might take them 3 at a time because you've got
Okay.
6 hands up. So let's take Chris and then Rowan, and let's try and be succinct.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so support the strategy. I think, lots of engagement through the process. One thing that I think is really important for us, it gives us a clear strategic direction as an organisation, and I think it indicates our strategic direction for stakeholders and partners. I know there's plans, Ivan, to do a lot of comms and engagement around the strategy now over the next 4 weeks. Just keen that we share that feedback with the board so that the themes come through what our partners and stakeholders have said before we finalise and publish and put the strategy out for approval.
Thank you, Chris. Rowan?
Yes, I think there's been some really good work going into the strategy, and I think in order for it to land and resonate across the wider NHS in Wales, there is a bit of bridging to be done. So, we have done a lot of thinking into how we build digital muscle fitness, if you like, to be responsive and be able to deliver on some of the future challenges and opportunities we see in transforming healthcare in Wales. But I think we also have to bear in mind that many of our stakeholders across the NHS in Wales perhaps are not, necessarily thinking digital first. And what perhaps is missing for that audience is some of the so what, why these choices enable us to support the wider service with perhaps more optionality, or greater responsiveness as we see opportunities arising to take advantage of transforming health through digital, and that's one of the things that I think perhaps is missing. So some thoughts of the so what in the wider organisational strategy for what it will mean for our partners, I think would be very helpful.
Okay, do you want to pick up on those points, and then I'll come back to Marion, Alistair, and Claire.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Chris first. Yeah, I think that's a good idea that we share the feedback themes with the board. We'll work with you and with board members on what the most appropriate way to do that is. I think we've got a development session at the end of February, and then we'll be bringing it back to formal board about 4 weeks after that. So we'll review that, and that'd be good for us for our record as well to document that in a structured way. David, the references in the exec summary, as I said, there's still polish, and there's refinement to the wording that we're using so that we're landing the right messages. And an example of that, if Helen was here, she would be asking, it says electronic patient record. I thought we had decided to call it an electronic health record. So we are still iterating the document as we go. I think my feeling is that the general drift in the strategy and in what we do and what we've said in our INTP is towards not separating out into a health record, a care record, a mental health record, a medicines record, but instead describing it as one integrated, foundational, comprehensive electronic health record that includes all of those things. And then you can extract the domains, or the specialty areas or whatever that it is that are of primary interest to you as a purposeful care data record or clinical data record. So I think that's the direction we're going to, but we'll definitely look at the wording and make sure that we are giving mental health enough prominence that everybody understands that is such an important part of the overall health record. And that we'll need to cover that with the integrated healthcare record because of the health and care settings that we have there. Net benefit. I know you're going to ask that. We've tried various for that statement. We've tried various things, including putting a number on it, a quantifiable monetary equivalent of the value of our research and innovation and what it delivers back to the system. And at the minute, we're settled on net benefit, which, as you say, in some ways could be described as quite an easy target to achieve quite soon. I think the the interaction with the research and innovation strategy is an important part, because that's where we would detail what it is that we mean and our interpretation of net benefit. But we'll look over that, and I'm happy to work with you, well, and with with Matt and with Rachel and with others on the R&I space to try to get the wording right. As long as we're keeping it in one sentence without lots and lots of subclauses, then I'm happy. And and I'm really clear there's still lots of room for us to tweak and to adjust all of these statements. There is nothing which is locked in other than hopefully the overall structure. Remote and wearables. We're doing through the NDR program quite a lot of work on developing capacity through the Advanced Analytics Learning program, for example. I think everybody says that there's an opportunity in vast reams of remote and wearables data provided by patients, but I think there's still quite a lot of work to do to work out how you turn all of that data, that raw data, sometimes from sources that are not as trustworthy or validated as the usual clinical sources, into usable, relevant, actionable information for clinical or well-being purposes. My guess is we would probably start with feeding it back to state patients through the app, for example. That's probably our collection mechanism, probably our mechanism for playing it back to patients to guide their own condition and self-management and health and well-being. Really good examples of how people with chronic conditions already do that. But we'll continue to work on that. I don't think we can say anything specific at this point that would still be relevant or correct in 6 years. As I say, it's dangerous to make predictions, especially about the future. And then Rowan, finally, stakeholders not digital first. I could not agree with you more about where the position is, and I can only reassure you that all of us as an executive team are engaging all the time with our peers and with our peer organisations and stakeholders and with Welsh Government, trying to make the case for the importance of digital, maintaining and protecting the investment in digital. A Healthier Wales is pretty clear on that, actually, which is one of the reasons we quote selectively from A Healthier Wales in our strategy. But and so we'll be looking at how does our strategy be a communications tool to help us with that work. I think that work of persuasion is something that you need to do through engagement, through peer groups, through influence, through close collaborative working, and the strategy supports that as a document in itself. It doesn't do it on its own. It's a tool that we can use by making sure we've got a really clear, consistent, well-expressed message.
Okay, and then we'll take Marion, Alistair and Claire, and then come back to you, Ivan, and then we'll need to move on to your next item.
Diolch Cadeirydd. Just building really on Rowan's comments. I mean, I think it's been great to see the evolving of this strategy, and it is simple, it's easy to digest and easy to remember, as you outlined, Ivan. In terms of the engagement, you said that the response to date has been very positive, feedback really positive. What's your assessment, though, of the maturity of our external stakeholders within the wider NHS of understanding of the importance of digital? I mean, you've partially referenced this and the importance of the strategy in terms of increasing that understanding. But what's your current assessment of the readiness of our partners within NHS Wales?
Alistair.
Yeah, thanks, Ivan, and also for such a clear, well set out document, and much appreciate the work that's gone into it. 3 points which don't need to be responded to just now, but perhaps could be given some thought. In the covering document 3.3, the objectives link to the Welsh Government Digital and Data Strategy for Health and Social Care in Wales, and refer to measurable outputs. I'd be very interested in outcomes, as they can be extremely different things, and that links with mission 4, where there's a strong reference to outcomes, but I'm just interested to see what examples we've got of that. The second thought is there any strategic role that we should spell out in regard to dental health as one of the best general indicators of health, general health outcomes? And thirdly, in mission 2, we're working closely with local authorities, it says, to lead a digital transformation program. Again, is there anything we can point to in terms of health of outcomes beyond the e-library. I'm not saying there must be something beyond the e-library, but just interested to see if we have them. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair. And then finally, Claire.
Yeah, mine was got a brief comment to say, actually, if you look at page 45, so they always keep the best to last, I think that plan on a page really brings to life and links our vision, our mission, our visions, our missions, our purpose, and how the values fits in. And I know through talking with my team, that really brought it to life because it very simply encapsulates what we do in essence. I know we have worked quite hard to articulate our outcomes. What a difference can we make? And I echo others' sentiment in a financially constrained, there is a real importance to do that. But I think the end diagram that you see really is smashing. And I think it reflects all the hard work that Evan has done with us as a team. And believe me, it was challenging to get us all onto the same page using language we all really feel we could rally behind as an organisation and take forward. So well done. I think it's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. You don't need to respond to the last point, Evan. You may want to.
Well, I'll just use it as an opportunity to comment. So, as I said, a lot of people worked really hard on this, and I'm always a believer that you can have fun. Well, you can do serious things, but still have fun doing it. So when we were developing A Healthier Wales, we had nicknames for each of the main diagrams that were in A Healthier Wales, and there are nicknames for some of the diagrams in this. So this one's called the Knitcombs diagram, because several of us are parents with children of school age, and so the narrow lines between them look like a knitcomb. So I'm only mentioning that because it helps people to remember it. Once you've heard it once, you can't forget it. So hopefully it does the trick. Alistair, outputs versus outcomes. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is part of us tightening up on language and being consistent and making sure that when we say something, we're saying it in the same way all the way through the document, and that we're distinguishing between outputs and outcomes. So I think there's really important work there. I think that and it applies in the program space and in various other things. And I think we're trying to refine the the relationship between or if I put it in programs language, projects deliver outputs, programs deliver outcomes, and those outcomes deliver benefits. And we're trying to be consistent and clear as much as we can under the banner of simplifying everything we do. We simplify our language as well. The strategy is I would say our strategy is oriented towards the things that we do and the domains that we do. And we're trying to get the right balance between our sort of our whole system scope of describing all the things that digital could do across health and social care within the constraints and confines of what it is that DHCW does. So we don't do everything digital in health and care. There are administrative systems that we don't do, for example. And we, although we provide authenticated digital access for dentists for referral systems, for example, we don't run digital services, digital software systems for dentists in the same way that we do for GPs, for example. So we're trying to balance this to the things that DHCW do, but also acting as a system leader that they're indicating, the opportunities across the wider system. And the same goes for social care. But we'll bring those things in to try to make sure that we're getting the right balance, because we do want to be a system leader. It's a clear objective for us. And then I think that comes to Marian's question, which is a real googly, Marian, asking me to give you an assessment of the maturity of our external stakeholders. What a dangerous thing to do in a public meeting. So I think our closest stakeholders are all very much on the same page as us. They would be. We work in a digital community. Digital directors, the chief digital and innovation officer in Welsh Government, clinical informatics leads, all highly engaged in digital, and all naturally enough of the view that digital and data is the best and most realistic opportunity for moving health and social care to a more sustainable mode of delivery, and all, I would almost say campaigning, but certainly advocating very strongly for more investment in digital and in data. So amongst all of our closest stakeholders, right, the maturity, I would say the maturity of that is good, and it's better. It has much. The process of assessing our digital maturity has helped us to mature further in our thinking. I can't speak for the wider system. That is beyond our ken really as an organization. There are real challenges, aren't there? We all know, we read it in the news about the choices and priorities that need to be set across the whole of health and social care delivery. I would say that we need to be putting more and more into data and digital and really protecting the digital investment. But I would say that, wouldn't I? As I'm sure we all would on this call. So that's part of the constant conversation and dialogue that we have with Welsh Government. That's a sufficiently political answer.
Thank you. Thank you for taking us through that, Ivan. Thank you for the comments and questions, and obviously thank yourself and the whole of the team and the people across the organisation who've been part of getting us to where we are. We look forward to coming back to this in the March meeting once you've undertaken the period of engagement and consultation that you've described to us. Thank you, Ivan. If we move then on to the next item where you are back in the seat again, Ivan, the IMTP update, the 24-27 update, and you have alluded to this already in terms of where we are with it. But so over to you.
Yes, thank you, Simon. I'll be as brief as possible in order to keep to time. And I've already mentioned a little bit about this. So in the paper, we have an update on where we are in terms of our annual cycle when it comes to creating the IMTP. You will have had an update recently about the workshops that have been running throughout November, running up to Christmas time with all of our teams. They are developing in an organic way, offering what needs to be submitted into the IMT next year, and the work that's continuing, and it describes the routes or the pathways, the delivery pathways. Just before Christmas, we received the framework from government, and we've also been given the financial position which we will be facing next year. The framework from government is relatively consistent with the previous year, and there are aims that have been set out. They've changed somewhat, but in general, we're on the same pathway. And one of the clear things here is that there's a great emphasis on the coming year. You know, similar to last year, there is no equal balance in terms of the 3 years. There's more detail and more pressure on the initial year, the first year, because of the position that we are in. So the work is continuing within the organization. Throughout February, there are further workshops in order to improve the current draft and to assess the resources against those. I think the opportunity here for us as an organization, different to last year, we now have an opportunity to combine what our teams are telling us and what needs to be on that pathway for the coming 3 years, and where our strategy is telling us where we wish to be in 6 years' time. And there's tension between those two elements. So for the first time, I think that we're able to combine the bottom-up and top-down strategic planning for the coming 3 years. And that, I think, is an important part of the work of ensuring that the strategy is correct and that it includes what needs to be included in it, and ensuring that the IMTP is driving us towards what we have in the strategy. So I don't think that there's very much to say. It's a process which I'm sure is familiar to everyone on the call, and you've been through this last year. I don't foresee as much change compared to IMTP last year and this year's IMTP compared to the prior 2 years when we did a lot of work to change the way that we presented it last year. So the format and will be relatively similar. Hopefully the length of the document will be similar as well. But of course, the content of the document is the important point, and we will be working with you and our teams over the coming 6 weeks before we bring it to you at the end of March. And we, as every other board, we will have to agree to the IMTP before the closing date, which is just before Easter. So welcome any questions or comments on the paper.
Diolch, Ivan. Anyone want to come in at this stage? As you say, we've had some conversations around this, and we will have another opportunity, and we will have an opportunity between now and the final document, end of March. Okay, it looks like everyone's content with the direction of travel, Ivan, and the information that you've given us to date. Again, can we thank everyone who's got us to this stage, and we look forward to seeing the future iterations, and then the final iteration in what is always a very busy meeting for us is the end of March board meeting. Okay, everyone, we're going to break. The agenda has us down for a half-hour break. If people are comfortable, it'd be helpful to get us back on time to reduce that slightly. People happy if we come back at 10 to midday, just over 15-minute break? Thank you. So we're back here just before 10 to midday. If I could ask people to remember to turn their cameras and their microphones off during the break. Thank you all very much. Welcome back, everyone, for the second half of the meeting. I hope you all had a chance to get yourself coffee, a cup of tea. If we move straight on then to the next item, 5.3, it's the strategic workforce planning update, and I will invite Sarah Jane Taylor, our Director of People and OD, to introduce the item. Over to you, Sarah Jane.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to go through the report today. Hopefully everyone's had the opportunity to read it through, but it's been a really interesting and insightful piece of work, actually, both looking at the findings and how we're taking forward last year's strategic workforce planning exercise, and indeed working with Gartner and others to look at the methodology to bring forward this year's strategic workforce planning following the launch of the digital strategy in March. So we'll be doing that in April, but it's been a really quite a different approach this year, and I'm thinking it will be a little bit more strategic because we'll have the digital strategy in front of it. So we'll be looking at a detailed plan for a year, but very much for the 2+ years and 5+ years, very much focusing on sort of that horizon scan piece, really, but incorporating in this work, also looking at the critical skills and the succession planning, which again, is the first time that we've done that actually as an SHA board and as a group of people that have worked through this. So it's been quite interesting in terms of the findings, actually. So yeah, really interesting piece of work. We've worked really closely with the directorate leads and heads of profession and so forth to work through various different ideas and really challenge ourselves on different things, really. So just very briefly, because I'm mindful there might be a number of questions because it's quite a biggish report, really, and looking at different things, is that, you know, we've worked through what the key findings are and put some really good development in place with our partners in the WIDI group partnership, which are commencing next month, which really go through all of the automation. They also look at the Scrum, the Agile, and the service development, which are sort of 4 big ticket items, really. And worked with Gartner as well in terms of how we can utilise that moving forwards, to how, you know, with the product approach and how we're working differently and going to be working differently in the future, and the various things that we're doing across the organisation, such as the work in the maturity assessments that Sam Lloyd and his team are taking forward. How can we shape and work that through so that we are fit for the future? We're robust. We are planning ahead. We're investing appropriately. We're upskilling where necessary. We're making sure we've got flexible, skilled resource to stand up for new programs and new criticalities. So, yeah, really good piece of work. Lots of things in train, and hopefully it's been an interesting read, really. So I would very much like to invite any questions or any observations and potentially to help in terms of how we're launching our new round in April. from the wider group to make sure that there's anything there that you would want to see as a key feature, really. And I'd be interested to have a look at that and incorporate that.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. Anyone got any questions or comments on the report? David, and then Chris.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Sarah Jane. Really good report. Enjoyed reading it. Many thanks. Particularly look at how the Grow Your Own strategy is evolving and working. So well done on that. The one question I had was around the stats we have on leavers. There seemed to me to be quite a high percentage of people in the brackets, bands 6 to 7. Quite a lot of our leavers are in that. Have we done any analysis to understand why that is?
Yeah, we have actually. The 7s is coming down slightly, which is good news. I think it's actually the concentration of concern is actually in the band 5s to 6s now, to be honest. And if I'm honest, we've done some deep dive analysis into that and had a look at that. And it's very much some of our new talent, actually. You know, people that haven't got 20 years into our pension scheme, that are not invested in the NHS, you know, longer term. And actually have got all of the marketable skills to actually be quite transferable, you know, talent. So I know, and I sat down, funnily enough, with Gartner last week, and we did a bit of a horizon scan on focus for next year and the next years after that, really, in terms of our key focus. And actually, talent acquisition, talent development, and talent retention are our 3 big ticket items. We've worked with the Silver Maple and the Talent Group commissioned that have helped us for the band 6s to 8Ds in terms of looking at when we knew that we had a higher turnover in 6s and 7s. As I say, 7s has come down, but 6s is still quite, you know, not where we want it. And Chris Darling, board secretary, and I are working through the band 3s to 5s talent program, which will be launched in March. So we're doing a number of in-house initiatives, as well as working through the various modules with the education sector and the e-platform to make sure we've got a number of development tools and support in place. But we're also mindful, David, that we've got 2 major private sector organisations moving into the area. And Helen and I met one of them the other day in the office and had a chat with them about sort of, you know, working together, not in competition necessarily, and looking at, you know, utilising some of our networks and relationships and partnerships we've got across Wales, but looking at that in a positive way. But we are mindful that the retention of our key talent, which are probably in some of those bands, is going to be a constant challenge for a number of years to come forward. So because we can't particularly you know, work through the pay and so forth, we've got to look at our organisation, our development, what's great to work here, and hold on to that and harness that, really. So that is absolutely a good catch, David, and very much a key focus for the next year and the years after that, really.
Okay, thanks. Let's take Chris and then Sam Lloyd together, and then come back to you, Sarah Jane, after, and then on to Marilyn.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a similar point to David's, actually. It was just picking up on our turnover at 8%, and the report identifies that as the lowest across NHS Wales, the highest being 19%, the average of 12%. But of course, that's comparing us with predominantly NHS provider organisations. So I just wondered, Sarah Jane, how that compares with the digital sector industry as opposed to the healthcare sector industry, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've done some quite wide analysis. In fact, we've even reached out to the Economic Forum, the International World Economic Forum, and looked at their plans across all of the workforce strategies in the space from 23 to 27, also with Gartner and CIPD. And actually, even when Helen and I had one of the big organisations that's moving into Cardiff in the very near future, they actually plan to lose about 25% of their new people within a year. So we're looking at, you know, we don't necessarily do that. We understand what our turnover is, and it's been fairly static, you know, at 8%, 7-8%. But actually, you know, we need to look at how we're going to change that strategy to make sure that we are, you know, with the technology and the competition and the marketplace ever changing and ever being more competitive, how we are going to link into that, really, because we are in a good space in terms of the digital arena, massively. That's a really positive position. But let's not sit on our laurels, really. We can celebrate that, but it can change very quickly, especially with competition as well. So we just need to make sure that we are, you know, consistently looking at that, speaking to people, understanding that. We've put some stay interviews in place as well for people to either move around, not leave the organisation altogether if they want to do a different role. So there's a number of strategies in-house that we're deploying, but again, you know, it's a constant check and challenge with that, speaking to various groups, speaking to the different specialties, and making sure that we are very closely aligned to what's happening on the ground, really, so that we don't sit on our laurels and celebrate, and in a year's time the picture looks very different.
Okay, Sam Lloyd.
Thank you. Just to build a little bit on what Sarah Jane said about the maturity assessments that we're doing. So we concluded a software engineering capability assessment just before Christmas. There's a service management assessment, which we've just started this week, that will conclude around about the end of February. And then we've also got the target operating model design work, which is underway, which is really going to help us build that product-centric operating model blueprint and give us a clear roadmap for how we get to it. So all of those things are going to have strategic workforce and capability development implications, which we'll be working with Sarah Jane and her team closely on to take those forward once we get to the right point, which will be certainly this side of the end of the financial year.
Thank you, Sam. And then finally, Marilyn.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah James. Lots of really good work that's happened. One of the things I'm wondering, you know, when we talk about the 8% and it's been consistent, I just wonder, when we talk about people when they actually leave an exit interview, how truthful people actually are sometimes. And I'm just wondering whether or not there's something that we would make people want to stay with us rather than go with somebody else that's not about the money. So I just wondered sort of how much work we've actually done on from that point of view, I suppose, rather than just the actual employment type of opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. No, good question, Marilyn. I think, you know, we've identified, you know, the exit interview, it's too late, really. You know, the person's already moved on in their mind and put their, you know, new offer of employment in and put their resignation in. So yes, it's a capture of information. And again, we've got skilled people talking to people and trying to get the right information and the honest information out of people. But you're right, it can be quite tricky and it can be quite difficult. I think what we're trying to do is be much more proactive and less reactive, which is why we put the stay interviews in place. And then we've put, you know, our team are working closely with the directorate teams on, you know, moving people around to new opportunities and making sure their skills are utilised and they're being developed and so forth. So what we are trying to do, we work really closely with the trade union group, looking at hotspots. So if there's a particular high turnover in one area, and there's potentially some, you know, some issues that we think, well, we need to sort of delve into that a little bit closer. We're doing some culture reviews and making sure that we're talking to people in a very open and honest way and say, you know, what's happening here? Is it, you know, it may well be because a new competitor's set up across the road and they're doing some really great marketing and they're really encouraging people to leave. But it is quite tricky. We are in an organisation that have got very marketable skills. You know, it's a very competitive, you know, environment, and some people will leave. There is an expectation of that, but we're working really hard to keep people, to celebrate the successes and to give people fulfilling and developmental work and opportunities, really. So we are trying to get much more on a proactive foot, and I think we're achieving that to a certain degree, but there's always more to go after. But you're right, it's trying to get that sort of, you know, trust and confidence for people to tell us, is there anything else in play? But we are trying to do that very much at an earlier stage rather than at the exit interview stage, because we've already lost them by then, and that's a shame. But on a more positive note, some people that leave do then come back, which is great. So they go and try something new, try a different opportunity, or, you know, move house and move somewhere else. But we've also seen a number of people coming back to us and saying, oh, just a great organisation, and actually the grass isn't always greener working elsewhere. So there's some positives in that as well. But yes, we're very much keeping an eye on that, Marilyn, and we'll continue to do so.
Okay, and now finally, Marion. You're on mute, Marion. you going to, Marion, are you coming in? I think you're still on mute. Marion can't hear us by the sounds of it, so has she dropped off as well? Her tile has moved. Yes, she's dropped off. Okay. Well, if there's anything really pressing, we'll make sure that Marion gets the opportunity to come back on it, perhaps directly to you, Sarah Jane. Okay, thank you very much, Sarah Jane, for that update. Very helpful. Clearly, a huge amount of work going on in an area that we all know is really important to us, because we're only as good as our people, and we're only as good as the people we can get and hold on to. So thank you very much for that update. If I move on then to asking Claire to put her daytime hat on for this next item and move on to the finance report and hand over to Claire.
Thank you, Chair. So Hannah is going to kindly put some slides up for me. So we're going to take you through the financial position as at the end of 2023. And then we're going to touch on next year and some of the risks and opportunities. So Hannah, if you'd kindly move us on a slide. Yeah, and move us on to the next two, I think. Okay, so normally when we do the finance update, we structure it such that we look at it in relation to our funding stream. So I'll give you the statutory position, but I'll also look at it through our core funding via Welsh Government and obviously NHS. We'll look at the COVID related funding, and then we'll look at the Welsh Government Digital Priority Funding, DEEP if we call it, so that you can see from the discrete funding streams where we are. Okay, if we move to the next slide then. Really to summarise our financial position, we are looking to achieve, or we're forecasting that we will achieve our financial targets for this financial year, and we've done so at the end of 2023, and I'll show you that in a minute. I wanted to highlight with you the run rate, and we'll run through that, really showing that the last quarter is going to be a busy quarter for us in DHCW. We will be moving a data centre, but we will also be making some significant investments within some of our digital programmes. So I'll touch on that. Our savings delivery plan, as you're aware, we targeted an increase in our savings plans of just shy of 5 million. And currently we're ahead of that, and we need to be ahead of it because we are looking to fund our data centre move and SEAM for ourselves. And as the chair will always ask me, it's important to highlight that there is a 2.4 million recurrent saving, that's 48%. And actually, we're just shy of that now. So we're 700 left to go within that recurrent, which is also important for us because we have a 2% recurrent savings target going forward. And actually, we carried forward a bit of a deficit. So we'll be able to recover some of that, but not all going into next year. The cash movement, which we'll see in a minute, has reduced significantly, and that's because we did make a number of big payments during December. But we're also working on a number of business cases. We have submitted the cancer informatics solution into Welsh Government, and we're awaiting a support. But we're also submitting an eye care programme funding requirement, and we're also looking at the NHS app and the funding requirement for that going forward. So there's quite a lot of work in development that the team are working on to position and inform Welsh Government of some of the requirements we'll need going forward. During December, we had some additional funding. So we had an additional £600,000 worth of capital that we are looking to spend by the end of the year, and we are focusing that to strengthen our cyber resilience. And finally, I am heartened by our recent allocation. So just before Christmas, literally just before Christmas, we had our allocation, and I'll take you through some of the highlights of that. But our allocation is consistent with health boards and trusts, and we will be expecting a 3.67 uplift and also additional funding in recognition for our inflationary energy costs and our COVID-related activities. There are a number of risks and opportunities, there always is, and I will also highlight some of those, but there is nothing currently that relates to this financial year. If we move to the next slide, please. So this really summarises our statutory position and requirements as per as at the end of the 2023 December. Again, our revenue position moved from 148 underspend to 171. We are forecasting a break-even position in terms of revenue. Our capital spend was in line with plan and slightly increased from where it had been. There was no movement in a public say payment policy, which is paying our suppliers within 30 days. But as you saw, our cash did move from 4 million to 1 million during the month as a result of some cash payments that we instigated related to DPIF programs during the month. Okay, if we move to the next slide, please. So this slide shows you per month our pay, which is the dark blue, and our non-pay, which is the light blue spend. And we are forecasting to spend 163 million this year, and to date we spent 118. So as you can see in the last quarter, we do have quite a significant uplift. And again, that's predominantly reflecting the DPIF, but also the fact that we will be spending a lot as we move a data centre. And also, as per the last board, we now see our first quarterly charge in relation to the scheme. Okay, if we move to the next slide, please. From an overall business performance, this chart shows us where we are underspending across DHCW and where there are spend pressures. So as you can see within strategy, the board, the clinical, primary care and business finance and finance assurance, they are slightly underspent, predominantly reflecting vacancy positions that we are holding within those areas. Where we're seeing the pressure points, and again, it's no surprise, is within operations and people. And people, because we made a conscious effort to support SJ in terms of some of the activities around recruitment and development. But equally within operations, that's really the work and prep work and pressures around the data centre move, which we've now instigated. And again, in the next quarter, we'll see a similar level of spend as the data centre progresses. Okay, if we move to the next slide, Hannah. This then breaks down our challenge in terms of our savings plan. As I said, our total savings plan was just shy of 5,004,978. We've actually over-delivered on that savings plan, which is actually what we needed to do in order to help support the data centre move and other activities in the last quarter, as agreed with Welsh Government. And again, in other areas of that 3.9 million, just shy of half of it, 2.4 million of that will be recurrent savings going forward. Okay, if we move on to the next slide. So in terms of our COVID funding, we split it into two. One is track and trace, which is predominantly now seeing out the costs associated with the licence, which will continue into July. And in the vaccine, again, it's heavily correlating to the level of letters that we see and send out during any period. So you'll see the light blue is the non-pay, which is predominantly letter and letter circulation. We did actually see a drop in December. I think it's really due to the number of actually working weeks. But we do forecast and we are funded for an increase in the last quarter. And I know that as part of the forecast, we are also doing quite a lot of discovery work to really look and reflect on the capability of that system going forward. So the COVID performance, again, reported and reflected into Welsh Government on a monthly basis. Okay, so if we move on to the next one, there's a lot of detail in the next slide because it breaks down all our digital priority investment funding activities. It looks at the total for the year, which is 34.5 million. At the end of the calendar year, we'd spent 24 million pounds of that, and therefore we've got a further 10.5 really to spend before the end of the quarter. And you can see that that spend primarily lies within the top three big programmes, which are NDR, medicines management, and the digital services for patients and public predominantly. And again, working closely alongside the portfolio teams, we are looking at areas of underspend and overspend and getting assurance that we will see that level of spend as predicted by the year end to assure that we will deliver on our spend trajectories. And actually that seems to be the case in most of our programmes. There is one that is slightly overspent, so WCCIS is slightly ahead of plan. But again, we work alongside Welsh Government to ensure that they will deliver and get additional funding if necessary to cover those costs. So all of that work is in train. So if we move to the next slide. So that's the revenue performance. This now splits it down by capital. The first half is our discretionary capital, and note that our discretionary capital allocation was actually reduced this year to 2.6 million. We spent 1.6 to date, so we've still got £1 million to spend in the last quarter. And obviously we had additional funding for cyber-related investments in the last quarter. We are working hard together with the teams to ensure that we deliver that, and we are confident we will deliver that level of spend in the last quarter, because as you can see, a lot of that does depend on the data centre and data centre related activities. Okay, so if we move to the next slide. Okay, so that's where we are and where we forecast to be this financial year. The next slide really looks about the financial challenge going forward and some of the cost pressures that we are anticipating as part of DHCW. I think it's true to say I'm going to apply to my notes because I've got all of these together after the board reports. But in terms of how this fits with our allocation and what gaps remain as a result of our allocation. So, like I said, the Welsh Government recognised and acknowledged in our allocations that we would receive a 3.67% increase. They also acknowledged that they would pay for our pay awards, and that would be funded centrally as it has been done this year. Energy costs, which as you can see, we highlighted that energy costs were a cost pressure to that. We are working through the detail, but they are looking to cover the inflationary pressures related to energy going forward. In terms of inflation, actually, much of the 3.67 will enable us to cover that. However, there are one or two areas that will be part of the SLA increase relating to contractual license increase, and yet we start those SLA discussions in the forthcoming weeks. So that'll be something we need to work on. We've also raised the importance of cybersecurity and also retaining some of our core services, and through the 3.67%, that will predominantly be covered now. However, there are a number of service and product choices which aren't covered, and actually within our unavoidable pressures, we highlighted the importance of the cancer care programme. And as I mentioned earlier, we submitted a business case which was 2.6 million for next year, as there is no further funding allocated to cancer through the Digital Priorities Investment Fund. So they are aware of this this cost pressure, and we are yet to have assurance around future funding streams. So although we have managed to mitigate many of our cost pressures through the welcomed allocations from Welsh Government, we still have a gap of around about 2.6 million, which predominantly relates to the cancer programme. So that's something that we are having ongoing conversations with Welsh Government on. However, that's just about standing still. Obviously, we're keen as an organisation to accelerate our move to cloud. And also we have a number of schemes over a 3-year period which will fall on and move away from being programmes to actually move into more of a business as usual perspective. And those currently are choices that together with Welsh Government we're looking on, but obviously we're keen to move forward at a faster pace than currently our funding would allow us to undertake. The other point to note is that we actually had written confirmation this week on our discretionary capital. If you recall, I just mentioned it was 2.6 last year. The discretionary capital allocation for DHCW for next year is 2.9 million. So it has increased back to its previous level. So those really summarise where we are. Obviously, we are working through together with Welsh Government to confirm our energy costs on our COVID costs, in order for them to finalise our allocation letter formally. I should also note with COVID that their allocation policy was to give health boards and trusts 80% of their COVID allocation going forward. As DHCW, we actually have most of our COVID costs relate to systems development and system support, which are not non-variable. and are recurrent. So we're also having discussions with Welsh Government as to whether we can achieve the 80% and whether we would actually require 100%. So we are obviously working through that and submitting a paper around that later this week. So that really covers our sort of current financial position for next year. I was also heartened that this week we had confirmation that we would not have to go into further escalations from a financial perspective. So that enables us to really focus on the next year plan and how we deliver that going forward. Okay, if we move on to the next slide. Then in terms of risks and opportunities, yes, you know, given that we have got funding allocations this year of 3.6%, in some cases digital inflation far exceeds that, and we won't be able to mitigate all of it without increases in our SLAs, for example. But again, we are working with our partners to mitigate that risks. And there are some opportunities. So we are working with Welsh Government on and supporting them in them producing a policy briefing paper, and we'll come to the JET actions later on, looking at the strengths and weaknesses of the current funding model, but also highlighting as programs develop and move into operational stability, such as some of the functionality around the app, the NDR, and, for example, the cancer program, which is the one that is immediate. It's how do we as an organisation transition seamlessly through the relevant funding models available to us to do that. So together with Welsh Government, we are looking at our current funding flows. We've done quite a detailed information on our cost base to understand our baseline, and we're trying to work with them to look at our forward cost pressures and forward activities, and how do we get to that and how does that translate. And we were looking to do this by the end of March. It's taking a bit longer than we would have hoped, but that's what we're currently working at. And I know this one's going to be on my tombstone before Simon suggests that it reminds me of that. There has been some movement in the work together with the HMRC, and they've escalated it to their internal policy team. I think it's unlikely we'll get an answer this financial year, but actually it shows that they are now working on it, and they're also working on it, I understand, for NHS Scotland. As you saw with the vacancy factor, we have overshot our savings plan, and we are using that to ensure the transition of the data centre, but it may or may not provide further opportunities later in the quarter. So we've also raised that as a potential opportunity. Okay, and I think there's one more slide. Yeah. So as a board, I'm asking to note the NHS and DHCW financial challenge and how we're addressing it. Note the position as at the end of December and the forecast achievement of our financial target for this financial year. And also to note the indicative financial challenges we are facing for 2024-25, and update you on the allocations we have currently received, and working closely with Welsh Government to finalise those so we can formally notify the allocations for the next financial year. And I think, Hannah, that's the last one. Yeah, happy now to obviously take any questions and comments.
Okay, I just couldn't see it. Just before I bring David in, couple of points. Yeah, apologies if I missed if you said this. If we don't get the money to cover the future cancer activity, would that mean that we would then be in a position of reporting a deficit budget for next year? And if so, remind the board of the date by which, because that then sets the date by which we need to have an answer, the deadline for Helen sending in an accountable officer letter, because it's looming, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact date, but I think that we have to balance, I think it's the middle of February.
I think it's I got 16th or 18th in my head.
Yeah, that's
16th.
right.
16. So if we haven't heard formally an outcome around our representations on cancer by the 16th, then Helen would be have to be in a position of writing an accountable officer letter that we can't balance because we haven't had the cover.
Yeah, so we've said that it's not a choice, actually, it's part of our core funding.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so that would be the position. Yeah.
Okay, so we're about 3 weeks away from that.
Yeah.
David.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Claire. Really good presentation. A lot of complex stuff explained very clearly. So thank you for that. It's very helpful. Really good news about the 600k capital that's helped out our cyber program. That's really welcome news. My question was around the overshoot in terms of our vacancy factor. I note that we've subcontracted some of that work out. So we've got some staff in to continue with the work that we were trying to recruit against, but we're still probably near enough 1 million that's basically not subcontracted out, that's recruitment that we planned. Some of it is in areas where it won't necessarily directly impact on deliverables for this year, but I'm guessing some of it must still be in operations. So my question, probably more to Sam than yourself, is to what extent is that vacancy factor having an impact on our ability to deliver the things that we've committed to this financial year?
Yeah, it's probably better. It is predominantly within Sam's area, although it's not alone, but that's the heart of the operational impact. So Sam, if you want to respond.
Go on, Sam.
Yes, thank you, Claire. Thank you, David. So we have got a significant vacancy factor within operations, but it's offset by a significant number of unfunded roles where we've recruited people permanently on short-term or time-limited funding for programs. So we're offsetting that. The vacancy factor is also offsetting some of the digital inflationary pressures that we're facing at the moment around contract extensions and so on. So despite having a vacancy factor, we're still in that overspent position within ops, as Claire highlighted. So we're just trying to use that to help manage the overall pressure that we're facing, really.
Right, thanks. So there's no particular programs that are likely to get delayed as a result of this. From what you've said, you're trying to best manage the situation that's in front of you.
Yes, yeah. I mean, we are we're managing it as best we can. We've brought in some external short-term resources as well. So, for example, on the RISP program, or to bolster the integration team, we've brought in some external resources. So we're using all the kind of mechanisms at our disposal to try and avoid slippage in delivery.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. Marion.
Yeah.
Sorry about your connectivity issues, just as you were about to ask a question previously, Marion.
No worries, perfect timing. I'll develop that conversation with Sarah Jane later. Thank you, Claire, for that presentation. Really helpful. Can you just elaborate a bit on the recurrent savings? Historically, there's been an over-reliance on non-recurrent savings, but I note from your report that we've hit the 48% of recurrent savings. Could you just explain how that compares with the previous year and
yes,
to that position?
Yes, so that's really, there's two big drivers in that. One is the work that Chris has done successfully with the corporate team, looking at our estates and our estates footprint. So we, as you know, we took the hard decision of closing the My Mylord office, but equally we've looked at our footprint in other offices, as the estates report highlights. And that's given us a significant recurrent saving in terms of not just the rent, but the energy and the costs associated with managing the office. So that's one. The other work is the work that my finance team have done looking at VAT recovery. So we've also instigated a lot of exercises that has enabled us to be more efficient in terms of the way we finance our activities, which again has given us a recurrent savings. And on the top of that, there is a tail of things, and they range from looking at travel and travel expenses to other aspects. So actually those two factors are the big driver as to most of those savings that we are now going to see on a recurrent level.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Claire. Obviously, there's some encouraging news in there in terms of the uplift. We mustn't lose sight of the fact that obviously the uplift is also influenced by our requirements to still make a further 2%
Yes.
recurrent saving. And Claire would be surprised if I didn't mention this. We are still doing a degree of robbing Peter to pay Paul that we need to keep a close eye on in terms of the non-recurrent savings, and as David rightly points out, the impact on the organisation, but also the debt we accrue each year in terms of those non-recurrent savings. So we mustn't lose sight of that. And I think the audit assurance, the board assurance report is references that when we receive it formally in March, once it's been through the audit committee. So well done to you and your team, Claire, and everyone involved. We are there, but we need to keep constant vigilance that we stay there and thereabouts. And cancer remains for me a considerable concern, because, as you say, we have to do it. We just have to find a way of making sure that it's funded. Okay. Thank you, Claire. If we move then on to the next item, which is the strategic procurement report, and I'm going to invite Ivan to kick this off, but I am sure he will hand very quickly over to Michelle.
Wel, hollol gywir, Cadeirydd. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Hoffwn i gyflwyno Michelle a gyfer yr eitem yma.
Thank you, Ivan. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm just going to pull out some key points because there's quite a lot of detail in the papers that you would already have access to, but obviously happy to take questions as ever if board members have them. So 2 contracts I'm presenting for the approval of the board to move to award today, and 1 contract is included for information because of the level of commitment from a DHCW perspective. So the first contract, this is our Microsoft reseller framework agreement. So the services, mainly licenses, but there are some products and services as well that sit alongside that we secure from Microsoft, are all provided to us through an approved reseller. So we don't transact directly with Microsoft, and that is their kind of standard approach to doing business, certainly with the NHS. So we appoint a reseller for a period of time. It gives us access to those products and services, but also the reseller brings support and services themselves. So they support us in terms of managing the Microsoft estate. They provide some training, they provide other services, and those are listed in the paper as part of that arrangement, which is why having a slightly longer term arrangement is advantageous to us, really. And the other point I just want to make is when I'm talking about the Microsoft services, we are transacting these on behalf of the whole of NHS Wales. So this is not for DHCW's benefit alone. And in fact, the majority of the benefit is received by the health boards, trusts, GPs, other healthcare service users across Wales. So I think it's important to note that we are acting in our national capacity in relation to this agreement. So the agreement will run for a 4-year term. There's also an option to extend that. As I said, there is some benefit in us in having that slightly longer term relationship in terms of our management position. And we're proposing to award to Trustmark Solutions. So Trustmark are actually our current appointed Microsoft resellers. So we have quite a long track record of working successfully with Trustmark in Wales. And so there's just a couple of other things I wanted to highlight. So firstly, the value. So I'm sure board members will have noted the value in terms of the proposed contract award. That is not a commitment to procure. I want to be really clear, and it's not even a target that we're aiming to achieve. It is an absolute upper limit. It's quite a high limit. And just to put that into context, and we would have discussed this at the board when we made the decision, for example, around the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement and some of the work that we are doing as an organization in relation to cloud hosting with Microsoft in terms of the Azure product. Our annual expenditure is much closer to 30 million, still a significant investment for the whole of NHS Wales on an annual basis. So it is not at the levels that you might assume if you look at the upper limit. The reason that we've put that in the place that we have is really to allow for growth, in areas such as our transition to cloud, for example. So it may be that we decide to take on additional cloud hosting services from Microsoft. We have a multi-cloud vendor arrangement at the moment, but it is quite likely that some of that would go with Microsoft. That would make sense to us. We've got the enterprise agreement itself, under which a lot of the desktop products are provided, is coming up for review next year. Again, we have some extension options there, but we may decide to do something differently with that. That's an option that we want to leave on the table. And we also procure some kit and some maybe additional services that come to the market through Microsoft. All of that obviously subject to proper evaluation and funding, etc. So we have notified Welsh Government of our intention to enter into this contract, and they have duly noted our intention to do so, which means subject to the approval of the board today, we can then move that forward to execute the agreement. So I'll stop there for any questions.
Thank you, Michelle. As you say, it's an eye-watering figure when you look at it on the paper. Anyone got any comments or questions before I ask? Okay, can I ask you to approve that contract award? Thank you. Okay, Michelle.
Thank you. So I'll move on swiftly. So the second contract that I'm presenting for the approval of the board to award is in relation to our end user hardware. So desktops, laptops, screens, keyboards, mice, I'm sitting here pointing at these things because they're the devices we've all got used to very much operating within. So that's what I mean by end user hardware. Again, this contract is for the benefit of DHCW, but also you'll see listed in the report a number of other organisations. And we actually provide a service to those organisations in providing this kit and supporting this kit. So the client services team who are in Sam's area actually provide a really good service to a number of organisations. So this is for all of those requirements in one. We're proposing to award to Dell, and again, they put forward the most advantageous bid as a result of an open procurement. So we considered, or we were open to considering a range of providers. Dell put forward the bid that we're proposing to take forward for a 3-year term with an option to extend for another year. You'll see again, we've got an upper value on the contract. So again, now this one is more informed by our planned kind of rollout over the next 3 years, but planned subject to funding availability. So I need to be clear about that. So I think we have more certainty for year one. And you'll note in the report, there's an indication of the specific kits that we intend to call off during year one. In subsequent years, then that would be dependent upon appropriate funding being available. So that again is not an absolute commitment to spend that for that level of expenditure, but it is based on anticipated volumes. So we've procured this under an NPS agreement, the National Procurement Service, which has now changed its name. So just get that right. So they're part of the Welsh Government Commercial Delivery Team. So this is a framework agreement that was awarded by the Procurement Service in Wales for the benefit of the public sector in Wales, which means we can access advantageous pricing, which we've seen through this agreement, but it also means we're not required to seek specific approval from Welsh Government because they have already approved the use of this agreement for organisations such as ourselves. Happy to take questions.
Okay, any questions or comments on this one? David.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Michelle. Just a quick one. The first agreement we spoke about covered all of the health boards and all of the NHS organisation in Wales. This one on the hardware doesn't. It's sort of a subset of that. Is there any rationale behind that?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm happy, and colleagues may want to come in. It is a conversation that we've had, David, because potentially there is benefit in NHS Wales acting collectively in this kind of area. And as I say, we've acted for the parties to which we're providing services. So I guess we have much more kind of certainty and control and actually provide. That said, I think it is an area that we may want to look at going forward to see if we can leverage, better commercial terms, to be frank, by acting as NHS Wales. I strongly suspect, I'm not the expert, but the kit that's deployed currently across Wales varies. So not everybody would be using Dell kit, not everybody would be using the same specification of kit. But again, that is something I think we could look at.
I think if our medical director was here, he would echo that from his own experience, Michelle. And it's certainly a conversation that, well, it's more than worth having, isn't it? And it's one perhaps we ought to be encouraging to happen in terms of the benefit that could accrue, both in terms of money and in terms of regularity of reprovision of kit. Okay, so people happy to approve that contract award? Yes, thank you very much. And I think you've got one. Do you want to comment on the one that we're asking us to note, Michelle?
Thank you, Chair. I'll do that one really quickly because that one is really for information. It relates to a contract. The board may recall that the decision was made to approve in 2022 to a Google reseller. So this is the platform on which we're building our NDR services. That's part of our multi-cloud strategy right there. We entered into a commitment just before Christmas, and that is quite a significant commitment for the organisation. It's funded through the NDR budget provision, but I wanted to make the board aware of that. It is for a 3-year term, and the reason that we did that, hopefully you can see in terms of the narrative in the paper, is because of the advantageous pricing that we were able to secure as a result of that. So by making that commitment, we actually make quite a significant saving on the services that we fully anticipate and plan to use over the next 3-year period. I think the caveat on that, and it does hopefully make that clear in the paper, is obviously we need to manage that very carefully. So we do have quite stringent control measures around the way in which we procure and use our cloud hosting services, and that will be the case for the Google services as we move forward, to make sure that we are both operating within that limit, but making the most out of that, what is a committed expenditure for that period of time.
One point of clarification, Michelle, is that a dollar-based contract, this one? Because with the figures we've got are in
Thank you, helpful reminder. Yes, so the values are set in dollars. You're absolutely right, by Google. Thank you, Chair. And I do need to point out and apologise to the board, in the detailed report, for anyone who was going through the numbers, there is a in pound sterling conversion of the dollar rate in the detailed report, so you can see the expenditure from our perspective. There is an error in the calculation, including VAT, so I will make sure that that is corrected. The actual expenditure number is correct. It's the number that shows the value with VAT, unless when anyone was wondering what value of VAT we were applying to that. It's too high. So we will make sure that that is corrected, and I'll check that in with Claire to make sure that we're comfortable with that and issue the updated version.
Yeah, we don't want to pay more than we should, because we know how long it takes to get it back. Okay, people happy to note that position? Thank you very much, Michelle, as ever, for the clarity of your reports on our procurement processes. And then I will move on then to the next section of the agenda, the part 6, governance, risk, performance and assurance, and 6.1, the corporate risk register. And I will ask Chris, the board secretary, to introduce the item. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm going to run through the report. I'm just going to start taking on board feedback from board members, Alistair and others, just by reminding the board that risks should be considered through the perspective of opportunities and threats, and that managing risks effectively can often lead to realising opportunities. So throughout the board meeting so far, I think we've referenced a number of opportunities that could present as threats or risks to us. So the growing importance of data. We've talked about tackling the shortage of technical talent from a resource perspective, moving to a recurrent revenue-based funding model, shifting from program to product-based delivery models. And finally, we've talked about the importance of empowerment and the use of apps, etc. So just wanted to set the context of the report through that lens to start with. Since publishing the report, the World Economic Forum Long-Term Global Risks Landscape 2024 report has been published. There's a fair bit in there around the role of technology, cyber, misinformation and disinformation, as they term it, relating to AI. And we will have a board development session in a couple of months that looks into that in a bit more detail. That's scheduled in. From a corporate risk profile perspective, DHCW currently have 19 risks on our risk register that's included within the pack. 13 of those are detailed within the pack as public risks. There are 6 that are marked as private. 4 of those are considered by the Digital Governance and Safety Committee, and 2 by the Programmes Delivery Committee in private session. The number of risks since our last meeting has reduced. So at the last public board, there were 22 risks, so it's come down by 3. And I'm going to come on just to talk about why that's happened. So just to run through some of the changes since our last board meeting, we've got 3 new risks on the risk register. I'm just going to run through those. So the first one, DHCW 0331, fixed term resource funding. So this has been approved by Claire, but I guess it's probably a joint Claire and Sarah Jane risk. And it was referenced earlier, actually, by Sam Lloyd when he mentioned recruiting permanent staff where we know we've only got fixed-term funding available, and responding to that and recognizing that we're continuing to do that because of the funding model that we have presented to us. We have now included and captured that as a corporate risk. So Claire and or Sarah Jane, I don't know if either of you want to comment on this one as it's come on.
Yeah, I think it's something that we look at every week, don't we, as a senior leaders team, as part of the scrutiny panel. And it's really about how we balance the long-term viability to some extent of getting the pipeline of really core recruited and capable skills, knowing that we're going to have to balance that with the funding model that might switch on and off. So I think this is something that we need to address through a more sustainable funding model, but actually in doing so, we want to make sure we've still got a pipeline of individuals with digital skills that are necessary to keep our engine rooms going. So alongside the exec team and also with Sarah Jane, we are looking at those programs and also looking forward to what the future operating model needs in terms of a cloud-based, product-based delivery, and try and balance that collectively, really. I don't know, Sarah, do you want to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Claire. All of what Claire's just said, and we've got this as a standing agenda item on the strategic resourcing group. So Mark, Claire's deputy, is a member of that. Michelle and I co-chair that, and that is a cross-organisational group of directorate leads, professional heads. So that's on a standing agenda item. So as Claire said, we're working that through in terms of what we currently got, what we're moving into, what the opportunities might be. Decisions have been made for all the right reasons, as Claire and Chris have both said, in terms of, these decisions have been made with approval of the executives to make sure that we've got that talent, because if we can only recruit certain roles at a fixed term, we're not encouraging people to come and join us, because obviously people don't want to jump out of permanent roles into a fixed term position. So just for assurance for the board, this is being worked through organisationally. Standing agenda item at Strategic Resourcing Group, and it will probably stay on the risk register for a while, I'm sure. And it's not going to be a quick fix in a couple of months, but it is being managed, it is being reviewed at exec level and also at the Strategic Resourcing Group. So it's being worked through together, and obviously solutioning and positive working methodology moving forward is in place to make sure that we don't have a major problem at some future point, really.
Thank you, Sarah Jane and Claire. So the other two new risks I'll just come on to. So 0332 major programs funding. So this risk replaces a number of risks that we have had on the risk register relating to funding where there is uncertainty about the future funding. So Ivan, as the executive lead for this, has included one overarching corporate risk, and as a result, we've reduced down to directorate level risks relating to the sustainable funding of those major programs for things like cancer, the NDR, WCCIS, DSPP, because there were so many, hence the reduction in the number of corporate risks. So I'll just mention that, and I'll mention 0333.
Can I just pick up something on 332, Chris? It's just in the resulting in narrative, and it relates to the previous conversation we've had. Because it also results in, I don't know how the exact words you'd use, but it is something around recruitment and retention of key staff as well. I think needs to be, and we've already experienced that in the context of one of the programs that's mentioned there. If we don't have identified sustainable funding, then understandably people are going to be thinking about what they might do or where they might go. So I think it probably ought to be specifically identified as in that resulting in paragraph. Ivan, am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course you are, Chair. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. I'm always trying to push us towards simplicity and brevity, and members will have heard me saying that we're trying to keep a manageable number of risks in our risk register so that we can keep them all in mind. If you've got 40, you can't track them all together. What we were finding was that each of these risks was bubbling up in the way that we escalate risks, and then we were getting quite a lot of duplication in the corporate risk register. So we've consolidated, as you said, it's very closely linked to 331. One of the reasons we've got the pressures on fixed term appointments rather than permanent is because we've got quite short runways on several of our programs in terms of the funding that we have there. And as Claire said, we review the funding position weekly at executives, as well as our resourcing decisions. So we're keeping an eye on it. We'll take your comments away and we'll add that into the resulting in to see if we can close them or keep that link, keep that interdependency clear.
I make the point because the mitigation of that risk is largely outside our control, and people who have control needs to understand the consequences of them not mitigating that risk, which are quite serious in the context of the things you identify there, but also in the context of us being able to do things as we'd like to. Sorry, Chris.
No, thanks, Simon. The second one was the Welsh Intensive Care Information System implementation delay. And I'll invite Ivan to comment, but this is going to our Programmes Delivery Committee in a couple of weeks' time for a deeper dive, just to give board members some assurance there. But Ivan, do you want to comment on this one?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yeah, so this is to do with the go live schedules or the timetable for go live for the WICIS intensive care system, the user acceptance testing that is required when suppliers hand over or drop the finished product ready for go live. There's a process of assuring that clinically, for safety, for usability, and for a whole bunch of other things. So there was more work there than anticipated in Ayr and Bevan. We're not able to go live in November, at the end of November, before Christmas as planned. So we're working closely with them and with the supplier to try to get through that. And there's a deep dive coming up in 2 weeks, I think the 6th of February, for those members who are also members of the Programmes Delivery Committee.
Thank you, Ivan. So I'm not going to go through each of the risks that have been reduced or closed, because as I say, the majority do relate to the programs where there's uncertainty about funding. There's one private risk where the risk scores changed, which is noted in the report. And I'll just wanted to finish, and this isn't to open up the discussion further, but just to make board members and colleagues aware, there is a deep dive into two of our corporate risks, 0320 citizen and stakeholder trust in the use of health and social care data, and 0263 DHCW data functions. That was at the request of the Digital Governance and Safety Committee at the last meeting. So that's coming back next week for a deep dive. And I guess we'll build on some of the discussions that Matthew and Rachel talked us through during the listening and learning items. And they also will be at that committee. So to some extent, we can continue that conversation with Rowan guiding us through that discussion in terms of a deep dive there. So great. Chair, those were the items I wanted to highlight and flag, and just to note the current risk profile position, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any further questions or comments before David?
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Chris. Just a point of clarification, if I may, Chris. So I'm on board with the consolidation of 4 separate risks into one around the sustainable funding. I just wanted reassurance that each of those programs, the funding is all coming from the same stakeholder or pot. So we're not sort of going to miss out if we only get funding for 2 of them rather than all of them.
Yeah, yes. I'll see if Ivan wants to come in at this point, because they're DPIF related funding sources, and majority of them where we had uncertainty about funding beyond a year. Ivan, do you want to comment on the individual ones?
Yeah, David, each of the programs is funded individually, so they all have individual funding letters. And what we've seen is that because of the constraints within the Welsh Government on their own budgetary position, we're seeing, let's say, shorter runways in terms of the funding that they provide to us, sometimes on a 1-year cycle, for example. So we're working closely with Mike Emery as Chief Digital Officer. He's the budget holder inside Welsh Government, to manage that position together with him, and to understand what we've got as we look forward into 24-25 and others. So there are the risks are not all connected, right? So it wouldn't be a 20% reduction across every single program. It affects them differently, but we're tracking them corporately and we're tracking them within the program board for each of those. It's just that at this corporate level, for the board level, where we're consolidating them.
Yes, and also, am I right? Though I think they are all DPIF at the moment, if we're going to achieve a sustainable funding future, then that is almost certainly not going to be the position that needs to prevail, because otherwise they won't effectively be sustainable. We do need to have conversations around other sources of funding. For a DSPP is a good example. One assumes it's a long-term initiative that continually develops, what it needs to be somewhere which recognizes the sustainable nature of the funding at some point. Go on.
Yeah, if I could just, I think that would be a different risk. So the risk that we've consolidated is that the runway on programs funding is quite short, and therefore that gives us a lack of certainty for the program delivery, which was usually be set out in a business case, but the funding does not always match the full length of the program delivery business case. So that's the risk that we're consolidating here. Then there's another one about, well, what happens when the program funding comes to an end as intended, because the program period has come to an end? How do we transition and maintain that service then through our core funding? That I think would be a separate risk, which we will be managing differently because the mitigations are slightly different.
Then that's probably a risk we need to look at how we articulate in the going forward. Yes, Rowan.
Simon, the only point I would make about that, though, is if we are allocating monies to developing a new service that we do not have clarity that we have funding to operate, we have to kind of scratch our heads and say, how does that work for the value for money out of the public purse? So I do understand, Ivan, they are separate funding pots and discussions within Welsh Government, but I do think they are linked in some way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, aren't you? It's like, you're producing a product that is going to be a fantastic product, but there's absolutely no money there to purchase it when it's produced or when it's developed. Okay. It's a complicated area that I know Claire was probably going to come in and say the same thing as Ivan, but we need to be mindful of how we articulate that risk, because it goes to Rowan's point, isn't it? We go through all this development and funded to a greater or lesser degree, and no indication of how it's sustainable into the future.
And you can't stand behind the benefits you're claiming for the investment if you can't operate the service to achieve them. So
no. Okay. Thank you, Chris. We receive that report and move on to, well, the new Ivan I was going to describe Claire as, but Claire will explain why I'm inviting Claire to introduce the Integrated Organisational Performance Report rather than as is normally the case, or has been the case. Ivan, Claire, over to you.
Thank you, Diolch, Chair. Yeah, and I'd like to thank Ivan actually for his help in the transition of the performance team into the finance and business assurance team. He's really worked hard to establish some really good fundamentals and foundations, which I can now build on. Right, so it's my first performance review. I'd like to start actually with the Reds. So you have your operational performance presentation in front of you. Notably in December and through November, you'll see that the service delivery was red. And that really reflects some of the conversations we've already had actually around the fact that we are doing some preparatory work for our data centre, and we did have a number of MIs during the period. So to elaborate on that in more detail, I'm going to invite Sam Lloyd actually, if he doesn't mind, to talk us through that KPI and to give us assurance on the outcomes and activities around that. Sam.
Thank you, Claire. So you'll note from the report that the availability statistics in November took a fairly sharp drop down to 99.902, which is only just above our target of 99.9. The reason for that, as Claire said, was because of a major change, which was part of the network commissioning for the new data center hall that unfortunately went wrong. So there was essentially a configuration failure during the change, which then caused a network outage. And given the nature of the underpinning network, that caused the outage of a number of systems across our estate, which is what's caused that significant drop. The change didn't proceed according to plan, obviously, so we've done a rapid review of our change planning and implementation processes on the back of that, and we've put in place a number of improvements, which include external validation of our configuration change planning. So an external organisation is now casting their eye across our major change plans and giving us a sort of critical friend view on that. We've significantly improved and made more thorough our testing processes. So we've now got a library of tests that we call off depending on the change that's being made. And we've got enhanced representation from our stakeholder groups in that testing process as well. A number of other changes as well that we've implemented. As a result of that, we were able to successfully rerun that change last weekend without any downtime. So the data center move is now on target, but it is in a position of having very limited contingency. The transition of equipment from one hall to the next is due to, or from the old hall to the new, is due to start on the 9th of Feb and needs to be really completed by the end of March. So that is on schedule at the moment, but as I say, there's not room really for any additional slippage.
Thank you, Sam. And obviously we're keen to finish it this year because we wouldn't want to carry any financials pressures into next year. So we're working collectively to achieve that. So thank you, Sam. So traditionally December and November are short, well, December in particular is a short month, but obviously that's the flu and sneezing season. And we have seen a hit on our overall sickness, albeit it seems to be more long-term rather than short-term. So as you look at the KPIs during the months, you'll see that long-term sickness cases increased, and we're at with 43 in December and 35 in November. Having said that, while they're off, they seem to be doing their mandatory training because our training stats on our PDRs are now at the highest level that we've seen. So I don't know whether SJ, you want to comment on the actions that we're taking to support our staff during long-term sickness.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Absolutely. We've got a number of very long-term complex cases actually, and just for the assurance of the board, these all individuals are being supported by their line managers and by my team, and indeed wider clinical support through occupational health, the EAP, but also through obviously their GPs and hospitals, etc. So, but we have got a number of complex cases that we're working through. We've had some people come back to work on a phased approach, and that's helping. But yes, looking at our, and in the strategic workforce planning report, there was a whole dimension on various different age profiles and so forth. But we've just had some people, unfortunately, that have been diagnosed with certain things, and it's taken a bit of a turn really. And some people are off for a long period of time, being supported through various parties. But yes, I mean, nobody's not got a support envelope around them, and their managers and my team supporting that. But yes, indeed, if there's anything that looks like an outlier or a problem, obviously we look at this on a weekly basis through the business partnering model with the people in OD team. So absolutely, Claire, there's really good assurance in place. But again, we've also got a lot of complexity and seriousness of some of the illnesses. So it won't be an immediate return on where we were. But I just wanted to provide assurance that people that are coming back into the workplace, we're offering that phased return. And indeed, hopefully people are coming to the end of some of their treatment programs and they will be coming back to work. But it will be a slow burn to sort of go back to where we were in the next sort of couple of months. So happy to talk to it again at some future point if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you, SJ. So despite the sickness and the operational issues, we've actually been quite active in the rollout of the NHS app, and I'd like to ask Sam actually to comment, because the primary care team have been working closely alongside the DSPP team in collaboration to really underpin the accelerated rollout of the app. I don't know, Sam, whether you want to comment on that or anything else related to primary care mental health.
No, thanks. Thank you, Claire. Yes, it's been a busy couple of months prior to Christmas with the onboarding of our EMIS practices. So that those are those are the practices that use the EMIS GP system. We had an accelerated onboarding for that, which was completed just prior to Christmas, and we've now started on the scheduling practices. This allows our the practices to start using the app, and also obviously patients to start taking advantage of the benefits that you get through using the NHS app. And the scheduling work, which the team actually started this week. So the first practices there are on board now, and it's due to complete around about the second week of March. And to give you some idea of what impact that will have, that will be around about 740,000 members of the population now able to access the app through their practice. So it has a huge impact. I'd like to say thank you to my team, actually, for they've pulled out all the stops to do this work and to get this alongside their normal day job. And also, I think we've seen some really great collegiate work in between the app team, the primary care team, and actually Sam's team in operations to get us where we are today. It's been a significant achievement to get the benefits of the app out there and getting used. So we'll continue on there. We will keep plugging away at it, but we should by our March board be able to come back and tell you that we've completed that practice rollout.
Great, thank you, Sam. That's really, but that's not all. So not just the app, we've been busy. We've also been making some great progress from the electronic prescribing, and actually we're testing our WICIS. So again, in terms of our priorities in programme activity, those have really dominated. And I wondered whether Eva wanted to give us any further update on those or other activities within the last couple of months.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. So I just want to reinforce those comments that Sam made about the joint working. I've been really impressed by the way that that so many of our teams have worked really effectively together at pace on the app rollout. The connection, the EMIS practices has driven user take-up. So at the end of December, we were at 76,000 users of the app. That is ramping up quite quickly, and it will continue to do so with Sedadim, and that's really good to hear. But that also is leading to lots more inquiries coming in from the public about how they get to use the app and their struggles with NHS login or with other aspects. So we've been quite intensively working on that. And again, that is a combination of the corporate governance team, the comms team, the primary care team, service management desk team, and our operational and DSPP programs team. So it's been really multidisciplinary, and we've been on daily calls for about a month from the beginning of December through. So really, really impressive stuff. And I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk about that publicly. On the other things, EPS, it was a really important public announcement. Minister was involved in it mid-November. The first end-to-end digitally transferred prescription in primary care, from a primary care GP practice in Rhyl to a pharmacy in Rhyl. So there's a big complex program of work there to get the functionality required in the GP services and in the pharmacy systems. But that service proof of concept, which built on a technical proof of concept, which began the end of August, beginning of September, that is a real important step forward. And in that wider portfolio, there's also good progress being made on the e-prescribing systems purchasing, and the business cases approvals that is required in each health board, and the funding for those from the Welsh Government to the health boards directly. So there's the digital medicines program is continuing to deliver at pace, and it's such an important program for us. And I also want to mention, I've got another opportunity here to talk about collaborative teamwork. The NDR program, which, as you recall, went live as a platform last summer. We're working hard on the APIs that sit on top of that platform, and there's an interdependence there for medicines, particularly because our medicines implementation is an API-driven, cloud-based implementation in terms of an open architecture. Really strong commitment there. That is lots and lots of really close working there between Sam Lloyd's teams, operational teams, and the API delivery unit, which is in his area, with the NDR platform and the DMTP program. And again, that is working really well. We took an update on that to our execs team yesterday, showing good progress on that against the timelines that we've set ourselves, which run mostly to the end of March at the minute in terms of our priority roadmap. And then we've got a further roadmap, which you'll see in the IMTP eventually, covering 24, 25 and future years. So really good progress, but it's the collaborative effort across our own organization and with partners that I really want to call out. It's fantastic. It's really good. I'm really proud of it.
Can I ask a question on the, I think it's makes sense to ask it here. On the NHS app login, because we've had our first representation on behalf of someone who didn't have any photo ID to be able to. Do we have in place any provision? I can't recall whether I've been told this before. You know, for someone who hasn't got a passport, hasn't got a driving license, hasn't got any photo ID, what is the provision for them being able to get the login? Do they go into their GP or and the GP can vouch for them? Is there because there will be that group of people, and we will get those coming at us increasingly, I suspect.
Yeah, I think Ivan's going to come in on this one, aren't you?
Yeah, Simon, it's a good question. So, as members know, NHS Login is a service provided by NHS England. We've got a very high number of registered users of NHS Login in Wales, about around 1.3 million, as a result of its being used for the COVID-19 app. There is, as you say, an online journey which uses photo ID, so passports and driver's license and video. That covers England and Wales. That's a whole of so that covers both territories. There is an offline journey for people who don't have that photographic ID, but that, because of the way that it's configured and set up and operated, currently is only available in England through GPs in England managed by NHS England. So we are building a Welsh equivalent of that. It's called the Welsh Identity Verification Service, WIVS, and that is it's the work on that is going at the moment with our supplier partner Kainos, and we're that work package is scheduled to complete in March. As usual, we've got a really strong user engagement in this. We've got testing and iteration and beta and everything else. So I don't want to say categorically that it will definitely be live then, but that's the timetable that we're working to. And in the DSPP app program, we've been quite good at managing those 12 weekly work packages and the sprints that sit within the packages. So I've got
there and thereabouts, that system should be live early into the next financial year. Good.
Yes. Yeah.
Good.
If not before. Yeah.
Sorry, Claire.
Oh, that's great. Right. So as you can see, there's quite a lot of activity, and also we have gone. We're doing lots of testing with the intensive care informatics system in the AB in an Iron Bevan University Board, and again a lot of activity in the last 2 months in supporting them in the deployment of the minimum viable product. Finally, I think it's worth noting that due to a lot of the activity, the quality actions are slightly behind where they need to be, and together with the teams, we're working to get back on track and get those back to where they should be. I talked earlier in Helen's brief about achieving the digital inclusion charter during the period, and I think that really sort of summarize then, we've had a busy operational time getting ready for our data center move, and we've had a few operational issues. We've had an increase in sickness, particularly in long term, that we're looking to address. Having said that, despite some teething issues, we're doing really well in terms of the deployment of the NHS app, working collaboratively across DHCW and with the electronic prescribing, and other programs actually are moving at pace. And therefore, really, that concludes our performance in the month, in the last 2 months. So I'm happy to take any further questions.
Marion, and I've got one as well. Another one, Claire. And then Rowan. Go on, Marion.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I can turn to the desk and the performance. We've noted that there's a new telephone system which now enables us to report on the number of phone calls which will be coming in through the medium of Welsh as well as through the medium of English. So can I therefore take opportunity and just to confirm that we now have sufficient number of Welsh speakers to respond to the Welsh phone calls and to respond to those through the medium of Welsh. You remember in the last there was concern that we didn't have that capacity. So just some assurance, please, that we have enough Welsh speakers to supply the demand. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. So I'm going to ask Sam if he would like to comment on the number of Welsh speakers they have in the service desk.
Yeah, thank you, Claire, and thank you, Marion, for the question. I can confirm that we do have a high number of Welsh language speakers on the service desk. I don't know the number, but I know that it is a high number and it is sufficient to be able to respond in Welsh when we receive calls in Welsh. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Diolch yn fawr.
So I'm just going to speak for the board and say I was so excited to hear about that adoption for the app. I think that's phenomenal, and just ask really if you might provide some guidance to members of the public who might be wondering where they can go for more help about, getting started with the app. Are there any places we can point them to in the community?
Yep, I'll hand over to Ivan so he gives the right advice.
Yep.
For the mine.
Oh, absolutely. So the last month we've enhanced the information which is available online because we want to provide self-service wherever we can rather than a telephone line. The address you need to remember is very simple. Simplify everything we do. It is apphelp, one word, .nhs.wales. And that will guide people. If you go there, you will guide through. There's videos and there's all sorts of other resources that will guide you through the process of getting on to the app. The app's own website is app.nhs.wales. And then the help one, which you can get to from there, obviously, is apphelp.nhs.wales.
And I suppose the obvious follow-up question for those who, even though it's a digital resource, for those who want help that is not self-service through a web, are we working with the digital communities team at Compass or others? I thought I heard that we were doing some stuff around their outreach work into communities as well.
We do, Simon, yes. So we work and have worked all the way through with Digital Communities Wales to support people onto the app. It is still technically in a beta program. So I would say that most of the users we're getting are digitally literate people, and and we're strongly encouraging feedback through the app's own channels using a service called Qualtrics, where we can manage and analyze the feedback that we're getting so that we're optimizing. We've not fixed a date as to when we come out of that beta. That beta phase of the program yet. But yeah, we're working very closely with Digital Communities Wales on that work. And as a policy position in Wales, it's always been the position that digital channels like the NHS app are additional to all the existing channels. There's no policy intention at all to turn any existing service off in order to drive traffic towards the digital channel. Clearly, we want as many people to use the digital channel as possible because that's more efficient for them and it's more efficient for the wider service. But we're not forcing people, and we never have in Wales. And that policy position was established during the COVID period and is still the policy position from government.
Thank you, Ivan. Marilyn.
Just similar to exactly what you were going to say, Simon, about the people who are who are currently digitally excluded. And I know that the SPP are doing lots of work with lots of organisations, and there's lots going on. I'm just thinking, I think we just got to be mindful. There'll be people who sit outside those organisations, and they're often the people who are most excluded and will need most of the help. So I think, as well as us looking at the links we've already got, I think going forward, at Digital Healthcare Wales is something we'd like to just try to get more links within the community, so we're not just necessarily relying on organisations. We've got a voice directly to our citizens, so that they can come to us directly, even through could be like a drop-in centre or something like that, workshops. But it's something that I know we've talked about in the future, but in the past, sorry, but I think in the future that's something for us to be mindful of, as well as our existing partnerships, as well as trying to form just new relationships outside our current relationships and stakeholders.
Thank you, Marilyn. Any other comments or questions on the admirably presented performance report, may I say, Claire?
Thank you. Just on that feedback point from Marion, I think we've learned a lot from the feedback and the direction of feedback from the NHS rollout. And I have to say, both the corporate teams has helped and the service desk teams, and as Ivan has alluded to, we've actually worked, it's brought us together to really look at our skill set and identify the areas that we need to focus on, so that we do touch everybody in Wales. We've got a target of 1 million, and I know we've got ambitions to do better than that, and we can only get there by making sure we address some of the issues that we've raised or some of the opportunities around giving access. So yeah, we're working on that. Yeah, thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Claire, and we are asked to receive that report, which I'm sure we're content to do. Okay, if I move on then to the last substantive item, which is the local partnership forum highlight report. It's the only committee meeting that's actually occurred since the last, because of Christmas and the Christmas period, really, the Christmas break. Both chairs aren't available today. They've both given their apologies. But are there any issues that anyone's picked up on the report? Because if there are, I'm sure I could turn to SJ to respond to them. But I don't see any hands going up. So if we could receive that report, please. Thank you. And then part 7, any other urgent business? I've had none communicated to me. I don't see any urgent hands going up. Date of the next meeting is Thursday, the 28th of March. And buckle up, folks, as you know, the March meeting will, for inevitable reasons, be a long one. I suspect we will go across the lunch break for that meeting. I'd be very surprised if we don't. If I then could bring the meeting to a close, thank you all who presented the reports, keeping to time, and for some very useful comments, questions, and discussion. I wish you all a very good day. The board members are returning for a private board meeting. Can I suggest that we come back at 25 past so we have a short comfort break before the private board meeting and to use the separate log on? So come back at 25 past for the private board meeting. Thank you all very much.